Hey everyone, and welcome to the March 26, 2018 Board of Selectmen meeting. I would like to call this meeting to order. Public participation, I don't see any, Mr. Mayo.
Nope.
Okay, let's move on to approval of the minutes. Regular board minutes of March 12, 2018. Motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Executive board minutes, March 12, 2018.
So moved.
Moved, second? Have a
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Presentation and action items. Mr. Mayor, the bylaw committee right now, do we need to wait?
No, I
for
think we
mi-
need to wait for town council, so I would suggest that we go to the group health insurance budget, Mr. Chairman.
Group health insurance, Mr. Gill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Group insurance budget, working with Amy Corsiati and Karen Doucette from our Human Resource Department, also with Mr. Mayo. For fiscal 2019, we are requesting an increase to this budget of $47,803. The tax levy portion of this budget is level funded. We're basing that on, we anticipate a current year surplus in this budget of about $300,000. The personal services line item is level funded. The increase to the transfers from the enterprise funds increased $47,803. The rates for next year, we're budgeting an increase of a little over 1%. So that represents small increases to the enterprise funds, and we anticipate using the surplus from the current year, where that will be in the budget next year, that we anticipate a budget next year, a surplus of around $150,000, $200,000 in that line item as of right now. The open enrollment isn't until May, so we're really not firm on the overall numbers, but we feel that this budget should suffice. This budget also includes $1.6 million contribution towards the town OPEB liability. Currently, the OPEB reserve account has $13.5 million in it. The total budget request for fiscal 2019 is $13,196,050, with $11,562,018 coming from tax levy, $355,707 coming from the water enterprise, $249,440 coming from the sewer enterprise, and $1,028,885 coming from the gas and light department.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Mr. Mayor.
If I can just make a few comments on this. This is a budget that 7, 8 years ago, Kevin and I would cringe whenever it came in, because we didn't know what the numbers were gonna be. We would get a fax, not even an email, a fax from Maya, the Blue Cross product, and it would say, your budget's gonna go up 16%, and I'd get that right before town meeting, and 16% of 14 million is a lot of money. So we went to work, really worked hard. I want to thank the board for all their support over the years on this. And we did enter the Group Insurance Commission, State Group Insurance Commission, and that has really paid dividends for the townspeople and have given our employees a great insurance, just like the rest of the state workers. I talked about how a few years ago, how high the budget was. The budget in fiscal year 2012, so 7 years ago, was $14 million with no provision for OPEB. And OPEB is money that we need to put aside, municipalities need to put aside to cover health insurance for retirees. This is something that we're rated on when we go out for bonding, saving us a lot of money because we're doing this. This is something that pretty soon, it's listed on our balance sheet as a notation now, and within the next few years, we're going to have a schedule to do that, just like we do with pension. We have to have a schedule of funding that. Our budget this year is $13 million all in, including $1.6 million for OPEB. So think about that disparity and what it's meant for the taxpayers. I can't say enough about the hard work of Amy Forziati and Karen Doucette. And they're working with the employees, with the Public Employee Committee that we meet with on a quarterly basis to go over how we're doing with our health insurance, what can we do to work this out. We don't have the problems that other communities have. And Amy and Karen have done a great job of working with our employees and showing them that they can save money and the town will save money by going into lower-cost plans that have the same doctors, the same hospital, and the same benefits. There's a mentality out there that the higher the health insurance premium is, the better the plan is, and that is so untrue. And that's something that we've worked hard with, and I think that the key is here is that the Public Employee Committee, which is a committee made up of all of the unions represented, I think they really have a level of trust with, particularly with Amy and Karen, and I think with the town as a whole, and with Kevin and I, probably to a much lesser extent, I'm sure. But also with our consultant, Kenny Lombardi, that some of you have met at the MMA, who really has helped us and worked really hard with this. So there was a lot in the paper about the GIC, about the issues that happened this year with them changing plans and what have you. We had a handful of calls. We didn't have a hue and cry in Wakefield like other communities, because they called us and said, PEC said, what's going on? And I said, listen, let's just relax. Let's see what happens. We've been down this road before, and it all worked out really, really good. So to come in level funded for the tax levy portion on this budget, which I think will bring us a surplus next year as well, or have money that will roll into free cash from there next year as well, I think is really a great testament to the hard work that's been done by Kevin and Amy and Karen and the support of this board. And it's really, some of my friends around me are looking at, one called me, said town manager has a 15% increase in his health insurance budget this year. Think about what that is of 14 million. That's a huge number. So this has really been a kind of a labor of love for us for the last 7 years, and it's something that I know I'm weird and strange. I kind of enjoy it and going through the numbers, but it's made a lot, so I do appreciate it, and I can't say enough about the support that we get from my staff, so.
Thank you,
Just
Mr.
wanted to say that. Now, Kevin will answer all the questions you have.
First, I'll entertain a motion to accept the budget and approve the budget of $13,196,050 as presented by Mr. Gill.
So moved.
Moved?
Second.
Seconded. Discussion by any?
What was the OPEB number again?
1.6 million.
1.6, wow.
Yeah.
And they
And
used to
that's
be-
yearly. That's
Yeah, yeah.
embedded in this budget,
Yeah,
yeah. And we have about 13.5 million in that account now.
it's amazing. It was zero.
It was zero, yeah.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gill.
Can I say one thing for Kevin, about Kevin, before he leaves?
Absolutely.
Kevin may hang around for the DPW budget or not, but Mr. Stinson will present that. But this will, most of the budgets out here in front of you are been done at this time from our side. We couldn't do what we do as a community. I certainly couldn't do without the hard work and help of Kevin. He's really a great asset and a great personal asset to me. So I want to thank you publicly, Kevin, for all your help and good work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Thank you.
Thank you.
What do you want to go to next?
Let's go to Rick Stinson.
Mr. Stinson, let us enter into item C, budgets for the Public Works, item number 29.
10 minutes.
Mr. Mayo just said that we only have 10 minutes, so. I'm sorry.
It's double last year.
Yeah, I guess I'm not going to break Ian's record tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me, I have
some of my staff here with me who play a big role in putting this together and working on this throughout the year. To my left is Carol Antonelli, my business operations manager. In the back row, or the first row, is Claire Moss, my stormwater manager. And in the back corner is Chris Pierce, my buildings manager, and my town engineer, Mike Collins. Is in the back, so. With that, I have 4 budgets that are before you tonight. And they include the tax-supported budget for Public Works, snow and ice budget, water and sewer budgets. The request for on the tax-supported side is for $5,712,218. It is an increase of $245,907, but I'll explain that in some more detail, and how we came up with that. This budget does not include, or does include, capital outlay items and warrant article items that were previously in, whether it be capital outlay or the warrant. They have been added into this budget. And in doing so, the way we showed that in here is to show the previous expense. So it does, the expense or the increase here does not reflect that amount of money for those things, those items. That amount, and I'll go through each one, but that totals about $450,000, and I'll go through those. The other thing this budget does that the previous one had a little differently, when we took over the Civic Center, we used a total amount that we had put together a spreadsheet, and I gave you the same spreadsheet as we had last year. Was $112,850 in the professional services side. We have built those numbers into the respective line items that they should be in, so we don't carry just the Civic Center number anymore. So it works like all the other buildings in there. And that number did not change. We kept that until we get some experience with the Civic Center. So let me go through the capital outlay and the warrant articles first. Stormwater article, which you had in previous years, and we've had for a number of years, $100,000. That's been moved into the engineering budget. And so you do not see a stormwater article this year. On the building side, painting, in fiscal year 2018, $25,000 was appropriated for overall painting and capital outlay. Other years, it's been more money. I think it's been up to probably $100,000 at times, and various numbers. This budget has $40,000 in there for painting. HVAC capital, which was for major repairs to all 46 buildings that we work on, of $100,000, that is in the buildings professional services budget. Buildings roof repairs, which is for all 46 buildings, that has been moved into the budget, and that is $100,000. Building security, and that's varied from $100,000 to $50,000 to $35,000. The amount in this budget is $35,000, and so that came out of capital outlay. And on drainage, in the drainage budget, we've had most years $100,000. Last year, because we funded the new Salem Street drainage project, we lowered that down to $40,000. This year, there's an amount in there of $75,000. That repairs major repairs to drain lines. We may replace a 100-foot or a 200-foot section as we need to. The numbers that I just referenced in the building side, they relate to contractual items. So those are things that we put out to bid and utilize contractors on. They're major work, they're not minor projects. They cover the schools, the library, and also municipal facilities. You'll find when you look through the budget, there are some items in materials and supplies that relate to the same thing, and you might say, why are there two? Well, the material supplies items relate not to the school buildings or the library, just the municipal facilities. And they are to support projects that we do in-house. So recently, we painted the bathrooms at the town hall. It covers that. We have to replace filters at the town hall, the public safety building, the DPW facility, the senior center. The HVAC money there goes to those things. It's a small amount of money. You'll see that in those budgets. Now, as you go through the sections, the personal services section increased 107,000. It's primarily due to contractual and negotiated increases. It's also has an increase in there of $10,000 for police details. Police details, with the amount of work we've been doing, has been increasing, and we're always, doesn't seem that we've had enough there to cover that, so we've increased that by $10,000 for next year.
How do we
Per-
do this? Just real quick.
Sure.
You gonna roll through the whole thing and ask questions, or
What would be the best
I
way
don't
to
want to
estimate
kill
it?
the night,
I know.
should we save it, or?
I mean, it's the largest budget that we have just about, so do we want to go through?
I just have a little question, I don't know.
Go for the little question, excuse me.
Personal
Mr. Stinson.
services, you said police detail and contractual increases, so no new positions added or
No new
anything
positions,
like that?
correct. Right.
So-
Thank you.
And just to mention on that, if you look, there's a chart in the back of that budget, in the informational section. It will show you there were 76 this year, 76 next year. Back in, before we took on a lot of these new responsibilities, we were at 79. So it's a number to keep in mind. Purchase of services increased 101,931. There is a general, across all divisions, increase of $3,800 for safety. Last week, the governor signed the law that puts us under OSHA now, so we need to do OSHA 10 training in the coming year. The fleet and contractual is up $7,600 to cover repairs that we can't do in-house. Some things are like the aerial lifts. They need to be certified when they're tested. The inspections on aerial lifts and other specialized tasks. Painting, we no longer can do painting in-house. Our paint booth does not meet the requirements set by the state, so we no longer paint in-house. Everything gets shipped out. Fleet and contractual equipment maintenance is up. I covered that one. Building maintenance is up 21,500. 15,000 relates to, remember I mentioned that we were at 25,000 this year in painting. So when you carried it across and we went to 40, 15,000 of that is in that 21.5. General building and maintenance improvements, which covers all things that we can't do in-house, whether it be for garage doors, fire alarm extinguisher inspections, window replacement when something breaks, contracted custodial cleaning, which we have at a facility, that's up combined for 6,500. That's some of the items that covers. Building equipment rental is up 15,000. That relates to porta potties that we put around the lake that was previously funded out of the Selectmen's budget. I don't know if it was budgeted, but it was funded out of there. So that is now in this budget, which is more appropriate to where it should be. And this one's important. The buildings, if you remember, and if you look down the bottom of the buildings page under professional services, last year we had a deduction of 123,000. 108,000 of that comes from the Civic Center or recreational fees, and 15,000 was for electricity. And that came from 5 Common and 11 Lafayette Street. That 5 Common, 11 Lafayette Street funding doesn't exist anymore. There's only about 7,000 there, so it can't take something you don't have. So that actually became an add to the budget because we had to eliminate the deduction. Some of the other items in some of the other budgets, the park and fence repair budget is up 2,500. That's for damage to fencing from the winter. The goose management budget's up 2,500. One of the things that happens with the goose management program is when you get a winter where it doesn't snow in December or it doesn't snow in February, the geese show back up, and we don't have a budget to bring out the company to take care of that. We had that happen this year. We've had it happen just about every year. So we've added $2,500 in to address that. And because the more we keep them away, the more they're going to stay away permanently. And that's the goal. Park and forestry is up $6,500 for some items. A couple things we need to do is GMAX testing on the artificial fields. We're doing some aeration and slice seeding on the grass fields. The GMAX testing is designed to ensure that a field is performing the way it's supposed to. And with respect to the impact or on attenuation and shock absorption. Basically, it keeps people from getting injured when they fall, so it's very important to cover that liability aspect. In highway, street sweeping is up 3,000. That goes with what we'll be doing, additional work with the NEPDES program, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, which the permit will go in this coming July, August timeframe. And traffic lines is up $2,000 for painting of traffic lines. The final section, the materials and supplies section, is up $36,829. Administration has an increase in office supplies of $1,000. This hasn't been raised in over 5 years, and it's hard to keep up and provide when you're adding new projects and things to keep up with just kind of the supplies, the volume, the paper you need to make those happen. Fleet and motor vehicle fuel in all the budgets is up. Here it's up $9,429. Remember, we use, and you have the averages in the back, we use a 5-year average. Then we do a bunch of research to say where's the rate going to be in the coming year. And those rates went up. The average was up a small amount in the tax side. And so that's how you get to that $9,429 increase. This year's rate will be, we planned on $240 for gasoline and $270 for diesel. Last year, we planned on $230 for gasoline, or this current year, and $250 for diesel. Fleet parts is up for maintenance, $7,500. Buildings, various supplies are up $5,500 for the various things that we need to do to maintain the buildings. Highway and sidewalk repair, this is in-house highway and sidewalk repair. We increased $3,000. I can tell you right now, that's, if you wanted a realistic number, that's not even close. I could go with $100,000, and that wouldn't be close. There's a lot of work that's out there. And the highway and traffic sign budget is up $5,000. We have two things. There's a number of signs that are requested and go through traffic advisory that get put up, but we're also replacing street name signs to comply with the manual and uniform traffic control devices, which is required. So, and the last thing, the total budget request is $5,712,218. with $5,636,215 coming from tax levy and $76,003 coming from available fund transfers, of which $43,000 comes from perpetual care income, $3 from the Park Trust Fund, and $33 from the sale of cemetery lots. And if you have any questions, and before I go on to snow and ice, be glad to try to answer them.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the budget as explained to us by Mr. Stinson in the amount of $5,712,218.
So moved.
So moved, seconded for discussion. Members of the board? Ed?
First, what does that represent as a percentage increase year over year?
What, on what?
The 5.7, how does that compare with last year's, 2018, actual?
And remember, because I added in the other numbers across,
Right,
it's not the full number with the 450. So, it's about, yeah, about 4.4.
But that, on a apples-to-apples basis, though, that's because you added in items that used to be in the capital budget?
No, the way I did it was I carried them across to show previous year's amounts that were funded.
Oh, that were in the capital
Yeah,
budget?
so it
that-
does not reflect that
So from a town
percentage.
standpoint, the
Right.
increase is,
Yeah,
it's just,
the percentage would go up higher.
so it's a 4.4 net of
Correct.
net of that.
Yeah,
Right, so you eliminated most of the items that were in the capital expenses you put now into the DPW budget.
correct.
But have we had a decrease then in capital expenses to reflect
Capital
that?
hasn't come to you yet, yeah.
So net,
Well,
I mean,
yeah, we'll see.
yeah.
We'll see. But I think that the challenge has always been to put more into capital and less into maintenance.
Right.
So,
Well, I recognize, I'm
Yeah.
just thinking that, in terms of tax dollars, we have an increase of almost 4.5% DPW, and an increase in capital as well, presumed increase in capital as well. Right. And do we know,
Presumed.
do we know where
well,
those numbers are landing?
capital was gonna be level funded at last year's number, but the question is, how are we gonna handle this that came over to Rick? So,
Ann?
All set it for
Well,
now?
just one other question too, just, all in with the AmeriCal, with the Civic Center, what is that costing the town? I know that obviously there are fees and rents and things, but,
If you look in the building section that's in the back, there's the first sheet in that section, is the budget we gave you last year and we kept the same.
Right.
And that's $204,178. It doesn't include the $5,500 that we had to add to the refuse collection budget.
I did see that. I'm just wondering, so is that all in terms of everything, janitorial?
Correct.
ev-
No, does not include staffing.
Okay.
No, staffing is on here. Does
Right.
include staffing.
So is there anything that's not included in that then? Like any fraction or portion of someone's position or
No.
services or?
It includes, it does not, obviously doesn't include recreation.
Right.
But it includes all of our costs.
So the total cost then to the town in a given year?
Right. And remember, it's important to remember that that building is in tough shape, needs a lot of work. We've been doing a lot of work there. So this budget could go higher. There are some items that could go lower. One of the things that will be coming back here is during the rainstorm, the water came in on the conduit pipe for the electric and caused issues with the electric panel. We need to replace that. We also need to do electric upgrades to accommodate the municipal light department work with new transformers and everything, and then break apart the, some of the offices and some of the areas down there into their own electric meters. That's gonna be about a $30,000 reserve fund request that will come forward. Okay. Probably next meeting or around there.
So how many pockets then will the Civic Center ultimately touch then? It'll be DPW, and then it would be capital, right, Steve, for the bigger issues?
there may be some in capital.
And reserve as well?
Reserve
it sounds
in
like-
this limited year, yeah.
So all in, do we have a sense of what that total operating cost is?
Not subtracting any of the rental.
Right.
From this, which isn't accounted for.
Of course.
250 sounds like a good amount. There isn't a lot in capital this year on it. But we have, and we have done the roof, we've done a lot of things, some doorway work, some windows, I think we're looking at.
Windows, I mean, Chris, do you want?
Painting, yeah.
Rugs.
Yeah.
And do we have a sense, like, I know that you normally try to project this stuff out, do you have a sense of, over, say, like, the next 3 or 5 years, what sort of capital, investment we're looking at, in addition to, obviously, the operating
Sure.
as?
That we're working on. I remember we've only had the building for a short period of time since
Right.
last May or so we're trying to get a handle on all that. That's why we kept the numbers the same.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you, Rick. And Rick and I met this past Saturday morning for about an hour and a half to go over the details of the budget. So line by line, we went over these, and Rick could explain in a very meticulous, thoughtful way the increases that I wouldn't have necessarily understood for the is it GMAX?
GMAX testing,
GMAX
yeah.
testing. I mean, I understand what it is, but professional services for 6,500, it makes sense. Obviously, we put these new fields in, we need to maintain them, we want them to be safe for our students and others that are playing on them. Even the geese, trying to get rid of the geese in the winter makes a ton of sense for our community because there's such a, there's such a nuisance. So I was very pleased that on each of these you were thoughtful. Did you want to ask for more money? Yes, and you did ask Steve for more money, and he said no in a lot of places. So, I mean, this give and take, but every single request you answered, at least to my feeling that the town needed it to keep going forward. So that's my thought on that.
Thank you. Mr. Falvey, you had a question?
Just on the net, and the increase, back to that discussion, how much of the increase, if you know this, is funded by the tax levy, right? So you get a 4% increase, but we get state funds, which, might be higher or lower than expected, and so forth. So
Yeah,
how
the
much actually
amount-
flows through to be an increase in the money reliant from the tax levy?
Out of the $5,712,218, $5,636,215 is funded from the tax levy.
This is mainly tax levy. Think of other things that we do with roads, and that comes in chapter 90
Yeah, I'm just
separately.
thinking,
So this is mainly tax levy.
So it's straight,
This
yeah.
is your normal
So the increase flows
operation.
through right to the
Yeah.
tax levy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tony?
First of all, I apologize for being late. I had a speaking engagement at the Galvin Middle School. I was speaking to the student athletes coming in, so that's why I was 15 minutes late. The rent collected, that comes in from the Civic Center, that goes directly into the general fund?
No, we offset
Okay.
this budget.
Just one general question. This is a little off, but the future repairs, I know we're dealing with the budget for this year, but I know you were talking about 3 to 5 years out. Thinking of like major repairs, do we have any idea, like, I know the floors themselves are horrendous.
The floor, we're gonna be
That's expensive.
doing some patching on that.
Okay,
To redo that floor
right.
completely is gonna be expensive to do.
Like-
Just like when we did the field house floor
Right.
as part of that project.
Is that like
Wood
three-
gym floors are not cheap.
Is that like
inexpensive.
300,000-400,000 type, that kind of money?
No, it's
or
gonna
is
be
that
at least
money?
250, it may be a
Yeah.
little more.
Okay. No, I just wanted to get a feel. I know there's a lot of different things. It's an old building. It's got a lot of, it needs a lot of TLC, but I just was kind of curious. So future dollars, maybe we could spread that out over time too, but, okay.
Any other comments on the budget? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mr. Stinson, back to you.
Sure. Snow and ice, we have increased by 50,000 to continue with our gradual increase to get to an appropriate number. if you go to the snow and ice section, you will see that and I apologize, the number at the top, on that first page in that section should be 1,217,000, and what's the change?
85.
$85.
I would say that was the request.
That's, yeah.
You said it should be.
Well, that's the
That was
budget.
request.
The appropriate, that's the budget. The appropriation's another story. So traditionally, snow and ice has been underfunded. So we try to put a realistic budget and say, how do you do that? Well, I use a formula that's worked pretty well over the years.
Farmer's Almanac.
That's probably the best one, yeah. So, yeah, but it really gets us close to what is happening. But every storm's different, every snowstorm's different, every year's different. You can't, you can't say everything's gonna work out the same. So if you go to the page that lists, and it lists a bunch of numbers in there, it's the snow and ice history. And it looks like this page right here, okay? If you look at that page, that gives you a pretty good indication on why we use the formula. So when you look at the left side, the left side's looking at a number of items, looks at snowfall. So we track since 2001, all of the snowfall in each year. We track the actual costs, and we track the actual events. So when you look at the cost, and I block out a 5-year average, and you'll see those dark lines that do that. And you go down, and the 5-year average has been $1,036,000. The 5-year average on snowfall has been 73 inches, and the 5-year average on events has been 21 inches, 21.6, or 21.6 events. Then when you go over to the right side, you will see a monthly breakdown of that, of on events, how many events we have, and then you'll see a 5-year average on that at the bottom. When you go to snowfall inches, that's where you'll see the 5-year average per month, and you go down the bottom and you'll see, on the second page actually, you'll see the 5-year average. One thing which is interesting, when you look at March, this March was 33.5 inches of snow, which I believe actually set a record for March. And if you look at the 5-year average, March is around 11.95. And if you look at February, which is, we had 11.5 inches this year, that is normally in the 32, 33 inch range. And when you start to analyze those across, is there a change in the climate? I'd say it's more of a change in the timing. Things seem to be coming later. And so that kind of gives you a good picture. If you go to the next page, which we'll talk about with the overdraft request, you'll see the estimate of what we have spent so far. We've had a total of 77 inches of snow. We've been out 21 times this year. And we have expended approximately, because we're still getting invoices in, but we try to estimate as close as possible, about $1,182,000 for this year. And we'll always remind you that there was an April Fool's Day storm one year that dumped 2 feet of snow on the town. So this will bring us to $800,000. Do you ever want to go to the max? I would say no. Do you want to get into a comfortable range? And that's why I think you look at the averages for the last year, yes. And you can look at, the reason they didn't years ago, they just figured they dump it on the next year's tax rate, but when you're spending that all the time, there's no point in doing that. So you might as well budget a realistic number that is gonna cover you, and hopefully we don't come back for more, you know? Fortunately, you get years like this where you don't have a choice.
You can do 800,000, take it.
So that'll be you.
A motion for 800,000, that's the request.
Okay, so, motion was made and seconded for 800,000. All in favor, any discussion?
Yes.
Discussion by Mr. Falvey.
So 800,000 seems like the right number, because if you take your 5-year rolling average and take out the 10 feet of snow a year,
Yeah.
it actually averages just over 800 grand a year.
Right.
So, so it sounds like you're dead on. Remind me again what the ability is to carry over to the next year, or what the limitations are on that, if you.
I only can carry over if I have bills outstanding. Otherwise, it goes back in the general fund.
Okay, which is why you don't want to overfund it.
Well, you don't want to overfund, yeah, well, it would go on into next year's rate, but you don't want to overfund it, because if you ever wanted to, you can't drop it. State
That's
law
what it is.
doesn't allow
That's
you
what it
to
is. So
drop
you
it.
can't take it and do an adjustment mid-year,
Right.
move
I
it into
think
another bucket, or.
What it is that if we were to budget 800,000 for snow and ice, and next year's snow and ice were $1.2 million, okay?
Yeah.
We could take that 400,000, and it gets paid in the next fiscal year. It gets
Right.
added to next fiscal year tax levy. However, if we went to 800,000 and we had 5 years of 500,000, okay, you might say, geez, we want to lower the snow and ice budget, okay?
Yeah.
We could do that, but what we would do is we would then run the risk that once, and this is state law, once you lower the snow and ice budget,
Yeah.
you
Can't
can't
do the override.
take advantage of that, you know, kicking any overage into the next fiscal year.
That's what it is.
So
Yeah,
that's why
what it- I knew there was a
that's why
catch
there's
on that.
communities
Yeah.
that still budget 250,000 for snow and ice. I just think that's kind of too low. It's kind of too crazy to be hit like that.
It's just, I mean, it's the same as budgeting zero for it,
Yeah, almost, so,
right?
you know, but
Because it
there
is
are-
what it is, so.
right, but we are getting to a point when we get to that, you know, 5-year kind of average, and we're getting into the right ballpark.
It's
but-
actually a good, you know, in a twisted way, a good policy would be, you'd have to eat it in 1 year, but budget zero for it.
Right.
Then at the end of the year, you know exactly what the number is when you're doing your budgeting for the next year.
Right, but how
You're
would
just
we,
paying
if
for
we,
last year's
if we
snow instead of this year's.
budgeted zero, we would have trouble.
Then there's some
paying
cash flow
the
issue.
guys.
Yeah.
We had a conditional.
It's
So we'd have to go for a
pray for
supplement
no
to town
snow.
meeting to fund
$2
it.
million reserve
If we
fund.
budget zero, we don't have to send out the plows at all, so that works out pretty good too.
Yeah, but you see where it could
I know,
be,
yeah.
to give
And
yourself certainty.
That's
in
one,
budgeting.
that's one thing that we follow strictly is no money, we don't, we don't go out.
Well, it's easy to budget when you have the actuals.
Right, exactly.
So, all right.
You had a question, sir?
Oh, I didn't know yet. I was gonna say it.
What constitutes an event? Anytime a DPW leaves the yard,
We have-
truck leaves the yard?
We have, we call it events when a sanding event, we plan for 20, and for plowing, we plan for 7.
Okay.
Okay. And then you have the other column, which is for hauling.
Any other questions? Ed?
Looking at the estimate through March 22nd, you list miscellaneous of about 74,273. What is that?
That's for snow equipment that gets damaged, which is specifically snow equipment, so a sidewalk plow could be maintaining that. We need to buy plow blades, we have to replace chains for equipment. We need to, it's repairs, it includes meal allowance, that type of stuff.
Does that, do none of those expenses get carried over into the DPW budget, the operating
No,
budget?
they're all strictly snow and ice.
And looking at this number, though, almost like 1.2 million for this year, I understand that the snow is unpredictable, but what can we do to get a better handle on these costs?
I think we have a great handle on these costs, so if someone has an idea, let me know, because we detail everything. We have a report that tracks it, we track time coming in, we created with our GIS company a monitoring system to monitor contractors, calling out our staff. So we have a pretty detailed tracking, monitoring program on all of that.
I mean, it's just like, as a for example, the salt and sand is over $300,000. You know, are we convinced that that's the best pricing we can get for that? You know, what's that process?
We do a consortium bid, and so we go with a low bidder.
Any other comments from the board? There's a motion made for 800,000. All in favor? Aye. Mr. Stinson.
Okay, the Sewer Enterprise Fund. Sewer Enterprise Fund is revenue supported, and the request is for $8,224,561. And it represents an increase of $320,624. $218,622 is the MWRA sewer assessment. That's the increase in that. Sewer Schedule 7, with the exception of debt, which is insurances, Medicare, some administrative cost, is an increase of $39,123. Sewer debt service is up $26,688. The budget increase with the MWRA sewer assessment is 4.057%. The budget increase, when you take out the MWRA and just look at our increase, or the town's increase, is 1.29%. The MWRA represents 77.1% of this budget. Police details are up a small amount here, $2,400. Sewer and electricity is down $2,810. Professional services is up $4,000. That's for stuff that we can't do, obviously, in-house. We have to contract out. We originally, years ago, had a budget of $50,000. We dropped that to $27,500 a number of years ago, probably over 10 years ago. And costs have obviously escalated, so we've increased that a small amount of $4,000. And then the sewer use fee, we increased $5,060. That's based on what we anticipate for increases in other communities' rates. Sewer use fee, and you'll see a water use fee, work this way. We have houses in Wakefield that get water or sewer, or both, from other communities, whether it be Melrose, Stoneham, Reading. We will bill the customer, they pay us, and then we give that consumption to the other community, and they will bill us back for that cost that goes through their system. Okay. And with that, any questions you have on the sewer budget?
I'll entertain a motion then to approve the budget as presented for $8,224,561 as presented by Mr. Stinson. Moved and seconded. Discussion? Ed?
Could you speak to the overtime of $48,459? What is that comprised of?
It can be a number of things. It could be sewer station failures. We have to go out at night. If we don't, it's liable to back up in someone's house. It could be a sewer main break that we have to deal with on overtime. So it could be a bunch of issues.
Are our staffing levels currently sufficient to minimize the amount of overtime that we're paying, or how are they related?
The overtime in this budget is pretty much for emergencies.
Okay.
If you, in the memo that I gave you, I referenced that water and sewer budgets are very well structured, and they, because we've been able to keep up with it. Where on the tax side, we haven't been, we're way behind. But on the water and sewer budgets, we keep those because of, whether it be, could be health, it impacts health issues and all kinds of stuff, we keep those right where they should be.
So the overtime would be used, say, if there was a failure at one of the pumping stations?
Pumping stations, it could
A
be,
breach.
even in a major rainstorm, even though there's not a failure, we're liable to have people come in to monitor stations because of the inflow into the system, which can tax a particular pumping station. We have Farm Street Station will get taxed. For the most part, we manage pretty well, but if a pump went down, we'd have an issue. We've had to, once in the past 17 years, actually dump out of the wet well into the brooks that's there. We ended up having to treat all the properties and stuff along the river and stuff. We don't like to see that happen at all, so we bring people in a major rainstorm.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments regarding this budget? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Thank you, Mr. Stinson.
Okay. The water budget is $5,008,316. It's an increase of $66,593. The MWRA water assessment, and I will correct a couple numbers here. If you look in the FY 18, on that page 1 that just has the 4 budget totals, on FY 18, I did not transfer a number correctly, so it's off $101. So FY 18 should be $4,941,723. Thanks to Mr. Gill. Did he leave? He's back there. That made the, I think the increase that you see in the budget in the right side is 66,492, and it's actually 66,593. So back to the amounts, the MWRA water assessment, it decreased $32,113. One thing to remember with both MWRA assessments, they are preliminary right now. They can increase or decrease once June comes by the MWRA. Most times they will decrease or stay the same. We have had 2 years that the number did go up in June. And we're left scrambling to figure that out because we've already had town meetings, so that could happen. Do you expect that, Carol?
No, we'll be below 4% again.
Okay, so we should be all set with that, hopefully. Okay. The budget increase with the MWRA assessment is 1.346%. The budget increase without the MWRA assessment is 1.995%. MWRA assessment represents 43% of this budget. The water schedule 7 is up $28,045. Sewer debt is down $2,312. And the police details, we increased quite a bit here, $13,800, to deal with a number of things. Obviously, if we have a water break, police details are impacted, but also with the amount of construction we're looking at with various projects coming up in town. There's going to be some police detail costs for us. The water use fee is $4,520, and professional services here is similar. We used to carry $75,000. We're down to, I believe it's 50, what's that number? It's at, where'd I go here? It was at 53,000. We've increased that to 60,000 because we dropped it a number of years ago, and so now we're just bringing it up to where it should be. And that covers our water consultant for issues that are beyond our ability to address. One other item, you'll see under materials and supplies, we increased chemicals by, I believe it was $5,000. One of the things we're doing is we're changing the chemical at the treatment plant. We currently use aqua ammonia, used for the disinfection process. Same chemical the MWRA uses. However, there's some issues with it. It tends to can vaporize and make it hazardous. The new chemical we're going to use is ammonium sulfate, or the liquid ammonium sulfate has lower volatility, and it won't vaporize. The concerns are much less, so we don't have to worry about staff, or if we had an emergency people going in there to address a issue with that chemical. So, but the downside is the chemical's more expensive. That's it.
I will entertain a motion then to approve the budget in the amount of $5,008,316 as presented by Mr. Simpson.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Rick, I have a few on water. Throughout this past year, there's been many issues regarding the water meters, high bills. What can you attest that to? Was it meter issues? Was it leaks at the people's homes? Was it leak in the streets? How come, I mean, there's been a lot of questions
Yeah.
being asked.
High water bills are generally related to a couple reasons. One is use. Everyone will say they use it less than they actually do. I can tell you that every year after I water my lawn, I'm going, what did I do? You know, it's just, it is what it is. The other reason is there could be internal plumbing leaks. If you have a leak in a toilet, you may not hear that leak, and you can be using huge amounts of water. Toilet leaks are notorious. We had someone that had a toilet leak and was hard of hearing. And it was when their son went over to check it out, and the minute he walked in the door, he could hear the leak. And so toilet leaks are a huge issue. Leaks could be in plumbing in the house. So the majority of what people are raising is the majority of the complaints are related to timing issues, okay? And when I say that is because, and we've been working, as you know, with the replacing meters to correct that. So we try to read every 90 days. In the wintertime, what happens is we get major snowstorms. 2015 threw us way off. Guess what? It's not 90 days. It's probably going to be 100 and possibly 20 days. Well, now they get this high bill. Now, does it impact them? No, because in the end, it's self-correcting. So when you go to the next month, it goes back to 60 days. So it is always self-correcting. It's not that but for that one period of time, they've had a high bill, all right? So with the new meter reading devices will correct that, because now we'll be able to read the entire town in a couple days, and we'll be able to really stick to 90, no more than 95 days in that time frame for reading. You know, leaks on service lines that go from the street into the house it impacts the town. Obviously, there's more cost that gets spread amongst everyone. Doesn't impact an individual homeowner. And old meters don't run fast. Old meters run slow, okay? We've tested, I don't know how many thousands of meters over the past years. I don't think we've had any that ever tested fast, okay? They always test slow.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Falvey?
Yeah, just for fun, the new meters, what are the capabilities? Are they electronic and
They're
communicate
electronic.
back and, right?
We didn't go with the, the grand system of fixed base where it just comes in. Ours is you still have to go down the street, but it will pick up the readings as you go down. So it's how fast you can travel to town to collect the data.
Okay, I was wondering why it was 2
Yeah.
days for an electronic system.
Yeah.
It should be like
Right,
every
yeah,
hour.
because we didn't go with the, I would have needed a few more $1 million to put that in, so.
Yeah. That's cool. Okay.
Any other questions from the board? Ed?
You had mentioned the police detail increase, and I think that went up about 45% budget-wise. You said mostly because of construction we're looking at coming up. So how much of that is offset then by, permitting fees or other charges to these projects? So like, does it?
It's generally related to our construction, not project stuff, for developments. So
Okay,
it's our construction
So it's
stuff.
a town-related construction then?
Correct.
All right. So that will be, that increase is a total cost of taxpayers, then it's not offset by
Rate-
fees
For
and things?
ratepayers,
Right,
yeah.
right, I'm sorry, ratepayers, not, yeah.
Any other comments from the board?
Just a quick one. Rick, are all the new meters in now? I've forgotten, but
No,
are they all in yet?
and I can let Carol talk about that. We've
Okay,
been putting them in. It's difficult to get into places, and
right.
To date, we've installed 475 meters. Of course, we'd like that number to be bigger. But when the project started, we were coming, it was Halloween, then it was Thanksgiving, and nobody wants you in their home at
Right.
that time of year. They don't want to take that time out. But we've seen an increase in the last month. We sent out a second notice stating that we've reached out to you before. It's very important that you get on the system, so you will result in an actual read versus the estimate, which can have the bill look really large, and the resident doesn't understand that we've sent 3 cards, we've asked you to, reach out to us. So the second letter is working, but it's also because of the season, I think, that we're having a better response.
Okay.
yeah,
And the
and that
residents.
475 represents this phase of meter installs. We had done quite a few before this,
Sure.
which is, and I don't remember what that number is. So we have a lot more installed than that, so.
Just as an estimate, then, for the final phase to actually finish the project, do you have any
We're
timeframes
going forward now and hopefully to get it all done.
for this year?
But it's gonna take a year to do it, at least, yeah,
Like a year from now?
yeah.
Okay. Good, thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, sir. Oh. Mr. Stinson, can we speak on to the articles that will present us at the April
Sure.
town meeting, sir?
Okay, the first one is the eminent domain article. That's an annual article, allows us to, request is for $1. Allows us to take easements for projects that come up. Most years, we don't use the article. If we had easement or that we had to take that was gonna cost money, we would have to have a funding source for that. So we would either have to go back to town meeting, or Chapter 90 might pay for that, if it was a Chapter 90 project. Or it could, if it was a water one or a sewer one, it might come out of the budget, but we would need funding for those.
I'll entertain a motion from the floor for, to approve the eminent domain article for $1. Moved, seconded, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Stinson.
Okay, let me pass these to you. Make sure I got enough here. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. Okay, the request is for $798,000. And go through some things on the request. This year's changes are related primarily to 4 items. They are contractual, minor increases in tonnage, an increase in our education and yard waste and material educational program, or yard waste and material processing program. The contractual increase is $50,927. The tonnage increase, I added 100 tons here. As you know, we've been putting out a lot of information on contaminated recycling, trying to get that out of the waste stream. That is, and we're seeing an increase in tonnage because of that. So that represents $6,770. The yard waste and material processing increase is $32,200, and the education is $5,000. Before I get into the recycling component, the processing component, we've had the same numbers carried in the refuse recycling budget for processing, whether it be gravel, yard waste, other materials down there for years. Hasn't changed in probably 15 years. And then we got a setback when we had our recycling contractor go belly up. We took all of that money that was left, and we put it towards kind of solving part of the problem with the recycling. As a result, a lot of material did not get taken out of there, and we need to get that out, whether it be catch basin cleanings, which are considered a hazardous waste, street sweepings, the same, and just other material in general. So we're behind on doing that. Recycling. Recycling is kind of in a difficult place. One is contamination, and we have actually a pretty good program, and I'll explain why, but contamination can be shopping bags, plastic shopping bags people put in, because they'll jam the equipment. They cannot be put in the recycling stream. Styrofoam is not recyclable as part of our program. Contaminated food containers are an issue. So people who get a pizza box, it's cardboard, has that oil stain on it, we don't want it, should go in the trash. Diapers, syringes, all of that stuff ends up, Christmas lights, you find all of that stuff in there. And along with numerous other items. What that does is contaminates the load, and when that load becomes contaminated, the recycling collector can reject it. And we could end up paying $100 a ton or more to get rid of it, and we only pay $64.85 to dispose of rubbish. So we don't want to get hit with that, so we need clean recycling. One of the benefits we have compared to other communities is we have manual recycling instead of automated. So what happens, and a lot of people will get a sticker on their container, when the collectors go out, they are looking right in the container. If it's contaminated, they won't take it. They'll put a sticker on there and tell you why we're not taking it, and they'll leave it there. So we don't have the problem that a lot of communities do. I know Carol in Medford, they have automated collection, and what happens?
Put whatever you want in there, because it's a dark blue belly, they call it. Because the drivers, when they're dumping that, they only care about getting that load. They're not going to come back and tell you that you have mixed use going on. I haven't been caught yet.
So we haven't been
now I will.
charged any additional fees for a contaminated load, and we want to keep it that way. The market itself is in a decline. It's in a huge decline. China's set new limits on waste they'll take in, and most of our waste goes overseas to China on recycling. There's a decrease in the need for recycling as the growth rate in Europe has declined. and leveled off. Oil prices being down, it's cheaper now to produce a fresh, brand-new plastic bag than it is to recycle and create one, okay? Many contractors are going back to communities, and we're not one, fortunately. I can't say it won't happen, but I know in Wilmington and some other communities, the recycling contractor's gone back looking for a tipping fee of up to $100 a ton because of where recycling is right now. I think two reasons that hasn't happened to us. If we had the old contract, which was extremely good, and we put the person out of business, we would have, he would have been here knocking on our door looking for more money. The new contract is, covered some of those issues that, with recycling. Refuse tonnage in 2000, and these are calendar years, 2017 was 7,088. We're planning on 7,200 next year. Tipping fee this year is $64.85. We used a 4.4% increase. Hopefully it'll be lower, but that'll bring it to $67.70. We have one of the lowest tipping fees around. Most of them are $70+ dollars, and all the way up over 80. And recycling tonnage was 2,120 tons. Fortunately, that hasn't gone down a whole lot, but we are starting to see, the last few months, it has started to go down. With that, any questions you have, be glad to try to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Good.
I had met with you and Steve on a couple of occasions about having a drop-off for people that don't, that, like myself, we swim in Amazon boxes that, during the holidays, or allowing people that live in condos or apartments that don't have access to recycling. Is that pretty much dead in the table, or is it we going to continue to look for that opportunity for some of the townsperson?
My recommendation is that you wouldn't move forward with that. On the condo, well, for a number of reasons. One, we'd have to have a site permitted by DEP, which is not impossible, but there would be some money involved to do that. And the Conservation Commission would have to kind of look at that wherever we put that. The cost to do, and I think when I talked to you, we were looking at like 13 days, 13 Saturdays, was about $94,000 additional. And when I talked to the recycling contractor, they can't do the days we want, because if you're looking to do after a holiday, what are they doing after a holiday with all their equipment? They're out collecting trash or recycling because everything bumps a day, all right? The other issue would be that where recycling is now, if we were to sit down and negotiate a contract to do that, we'd probably be paying $100 a ton for that extra recycling. In terms of condos, we don't pick their trash up or recycling now. That would be a complete added cost to do that.
But I was looking for like an additional opportunity for people to drop their recycling off at a...
Right,
Yeah.
it's gonna cost at least $100,000. Plus, we'd have to end up negotiating whatever the fee was for the tonnage.
Any other comments on the floor? Ed?
What if we were to, I know one of the biggest issues that I hear from residents is the fact that recycling is every other week, and that can be problematic. And if you happen to miss a week, if you're on vacation or just miss your day, that means you're having your recycling picked up only once a month. If we were to, I'm sure maybe you have done this, have you explored having streamlined recycling in the same way that we have the streamlined trash, meaning that there's a smaller bin, but it's a bin, the automated or automatic pickup versus the manual, in terms of a cost savings to doing that?
Yeah.
And how do they compare?
Yeah. First of all, as I mentioned before, we wouldn't want to do automated. We want to do manual. But if we went to weekly recycling, when we did the bid 2 years ago, we asked for a price on weekly recycling. Today's price, and this probably would have to be renegotiated because we didn't accept it at the time. Today's price would add $297,000 to the cost because you're adding another truck and you're adding additional operators. Unlike rubbish, which had the number of trucks that didn't change, and it actually, the operators and the staff on the truck went down, okay? So that saved money there. We also asked them, how much do you think recycling will go up? They ranged from 3%, 5%, 10%, 20%. High was 20, low was 3. If I do 3%, and I did it two different ways. I did it based on what we recycle now and what on our trash tonnage is. So on our current recycling number of 2,100 tons and change, we would save $4,150 at 3%, $13,748 at 10%, and $27,496 at 20%. And it's gonna cost you $297. If you do it on rubbish tonnage, at 3%, would save $13,813. On 20%, you're gonna save $91,957. And so, and your other number is down around 45,000 and change. Okay, so you're gonna save, even if you could get that high number, based on the tonnage from the rubbish, and you picked up an extra 1,418 tons, you're only gonna save $91,000, and you're gonna pay $297,000 to do that.
But how does that compare, if I understand you have reservations about the automated, but if we were to, or automatic, whatever you want to call it, but if we were to do that, what are those costs coming in at?
On automated,
Yeah,
we'd have to go out to bid to do that. Because now you're bringing in a component of buying trash containers. We pay for those, they don't give them to you, okay? And I believe that at the time was, and it was factored all into the pricing on the rubbish side. That would probably add, probably between $600,000 and $800,000 cost that you'd spread out over a 5-year period.
I just think it's something that we at least should have the numbers on, because it's a service improvement. It's not just, so I'd be interested in knowing where.
I think with recycling, automated sounds great if you don't want to recycle. If you want to recycle, manual is what you want to do, whether it's weekly or
Right.
every other week. You don't want to change from that.
I just feel like there has to be some way that we can achieve weekly recycling and not run afoul of your concerns, Rick, in a cost-effective way.
Oh, I think with manual recycling, I have no issue with weekly. My issue is with the cost, and that's something you guys.
No, I understand.
If you
I'm
guys
saying-
want to
I'm
do
saying
that, we can.
I don't know how we can creatively solve that problem, because there are a lot of people that have reached out about it. I mean, it's a common town concern. And I think, to Tony's point, I think part of the reason you suggested, as you had, as one option, is because people are saying every other week is not enough. So what can we as a board
Consume
figure
less.
out? Yeah,
That's it. I think Rick and I talked, and recycling, it as a commodity, US are not building recycling plants.
Right.
China is not taking our recycling. The petroleum costs going down, I think that's the issue. I have 4 humongous barrels of recycling every other week. Believe me, I would love to go every week. But I don't think it's just the extra 300,000. I think as a commodity, this is not going to improve. In what Tony said, we can't change the world, but consuming less is part of it.
but the Amazon boxes are gonna keep piling up
No,
on doorsteps
absolutely.
over the next 5 years.
But if we want to put on another 300,000, I mean, that's the
Yeah.
issue. Do we want to go into the budget $300,000?
Right, I understand,
That's the bottom
sure.
line.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't hear complaint one way or the other from us. I mean, we would still recommend manual.
That guy
It would
might.
just be. He's got a heart attack. But we would still want to do.
You're okay, you'll do whatever we want.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we
So
wanted
it's-
to do
Right.
every week, we could do it every week.
Yeah.
It's just,
300,000.
something for this board to consider as we move forward. Any further comments on what is at the table? So we still need a motion, so we need a motion to approve the refuge and recycling yard waste article in the amount of $1,798,000.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stinson. You're on
Thank you.
again.
Roadway improvements, request is for, and I should say, and I forgot to mention this, the advisory board, as required by the policy adopted by the Board of Selectmen back 15 years ago, whatever it was, reviews all the warrant articles, and it's their recommendation before you. The roadway improvements, the request is for $500,000. Roadway funding needed every year is, right now, is $2.1 million. And you can look at it a pretty easy way. We have 90 miles of public road. We need to do, paving lasts about 15 years now because of utility cuts and the quality of the mixes. So that means we need to do 6 miles a year. It costs about $350,000 a mile. And that depends on the type of street you're doing. If you're doing a water street and a main street, it's more. If you're doing other streets, you can get farther with the $350. The Chapter 90 will only fund this year 31.75% of the annual need. That does not provide for catch-up money on how far we've gotten behind, because it's been way down. Back in the early 90s, Chapter 90 would cover all of the paving needs. It no longer does. $500,000 will provide an extra 1.43 miles of road, or 7,550 feet. The addition, it represents an additional 0.68 miles compared to the 200,000. Chapter 90, in the early, mid-1990s, Chapter 90, as I mentioned, covered all of the costs for paving. Fiscal year 1995, Chapter 90 was 506,000. And keep that number close. In fiscal year 2002, Chapter 90 was cut to 174,000. In fiscal year 2012, Chapter 90 was 681,000 and change. Fiscal year 19, it's $666,777, and it represents a decrease for the past 3-4 years that Chapter 90 is decreasing. Last year, it was 671,000. So we have a couple things going on. We have an estimate. We have a backlog on paving because we have not had the sufficient amount of money to do 6 miles of road, and the money is decreasing. Okay, so we're requesting 500,000. Still does not provide the 2.1, but it does allow us to obviously get more done as we move forward. Some of the areas we're looking at this year are Vernon Street. Vernon Street's ready from Water Street to Salem. Greenwood Avenue from Oak to Pittman Ave. We have a number of areas that the Light Department has informed me they will have gas work done on, so that we'll be able to pave those in the fiscal year. They include Pleasant Street, Lowell, from Vernon to Salem or Salem to Lowell. We're gonna try to have both of them done, but I don't know if they will, those sections. They may only have one. Lowell Street from Maine to Vernon. Water Street, Butler Ave to the bridge crossing up by Narcella Field. Park Street from the gates up to, from Chestnut to Summit. Juniper Ave needs gas work, but if they get that done, we would do that. We're gonna do Richardson Street from Jefferson to Melvin. White Circle, Collins Road, Toby Lane, because we're doing some drainage work there, and then we'll finish up with paving. Portion of Jordan Ave, we cannot do all of it because there's gas work there. Prospect Street, from Hopkins to the Stoneham line will be done by the MWRA, which will be probably this spring or summer. And we end up taking a preliminary list, because right now there's no funding available, won't be available to July 1st. And so then we'll be massage it continually every couple weeks as we find out where the light department is, where the funding is, and we'll massage that. And you do have in the budget book a sheet on the Chapter 90 allocations over the past, since 1995. You also have a sheet that, and it's in the information section, both of these sheets. You have a sheet that shows the operating budget, for sidewalks and roadway repair. And if you look, it's $70,000 for 2019 and $132,500 for roadway repair in 2019. Sidewalk repair was $70,000 in 2002, and then it went down. Roadway repair in 1999 was $121,000, and it's only at $132,500. So with that, any questions you have? One thing with roadway projects, when we do those, we do everything. We put in handicap ramps, which is required. We'll replace signs. Sidewalks, because we haven't had the money, we spot repair. We generally don't do a whole street on sidewalk unless it's really needed. So we'll cut out sections. It covers traffic line painting, because they all need to meet MUTCD requirements. May cover some minor drainage work that we need to do. It covers all the adjustment of structures, and a host of other things. For that police details, for those projects, it will cover that.
Thank you, Mr. Tislin. Before I open it to the floor, Mr. Mayor.
Can I just say, I would love to recommend to this board $500,000. And Rick and I have talked about this, and Kevin and I have talked about this. I think we can get there, but my recommendation to this board is looking at the entire ball of wax here, all the budgets, everything. My recommendation is we can improve over the 200, but we've got to do it in 2 steps. So my recommendation to this board is 350.
And then, talking about 2 steps in a couple of years, you would then bump it up
Maybe
perhaps
as early
to-
as next year.
Okay.
As fiscal year 20. I agree, there's a lot that needs to be done in this regard. I'm very happy to hear that the light department improvements are gonna get done on those roads.
Yeah.
Because we certainly, the worst thing in the world for a road is a utility cut. That's what kills it, and that's why we have a moratorium. I forget how many years when you.
Ours is a 5-year
5-year.
moratorium. I will say this about the moratorium, there are a number of communities that have gone to a 10-year moratorium. And they hold to it pretty hard. We've been, some cases, a little lenient, but it's something you might want to consider in the future.
I want to consider that in the future, but I'm comfortable, fairly comfortable at the 350. Not super comfortable, but fairly comfortable. That's just my opinion, for what it's worth.
So I'm going to open it up to a member of the board to make a motion on what we present as an article for roadway improvements for this year. Because we have one coming in from Mr. Stinson at 500,000, and Mr. Mayo is recommending 350,000. So, motion from the floor.
Did you want to make it?
No, I'd rather kind of discuss it, so maybe we can figure out what the motion ought to be.
Okay? So, how do I?
I don't know.
How do I open the discussion without a motion?
You don't need a motion, you can.
Okay, that's fine. So, Mr. Falvey, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, sorry about that. So I just, refresh me again on the moratorium. So I understand we have a moratorium which says we pave a road, theoretically, nobody can cut it open for 5 years. is that a handshake? Is that a bylaw? Remind me where the power behind that, and what's the exceptions to that for emergencies and things like that? And who are the people that would want to cut the road open that we tell no to?
Okay.
And who makes
The-
the call? I mean,
the-
just kind of,
The policy itself was created by the old Board of Public Works back X number of years ago. Emergency things like gas leaks, water breaks, or water leaks,
is what it is.
it is what it is. They fix them.
Yeah.
You know, you can't stop them.
Yep.
In terms of developers, a lot of communities will take big developments, and if they cut a trench in the road, they tell them they gotta pave from point A to point B, which is well past where they were working. We did that, although we covered the area that, for Brightview, from where they were working from, which went from Center Street all the way to, almost to Main Street. And they paved that whole section. But there have been some developments that come in that obviously want the development, you want tax revenue, that's important. But we haven't necessarily been completely strict on saying, hey, you gotta pay from here to here. We've had them do some other things to accommodate that, could be the one up on North Avenue, up across from Lord Wakefield. We had them put all the utilities in before, so they wouldn't have to cut the road. Same with the one next to Armory Street, that was all done ahead of time. Some of them we've had come back and they have to infrared it and put up some money into a fund with us. Other communities will turn around and they'll make you do that long stretch of paving, that's part of it, or you wait 10 years. And they hold pretty fast to that.
And what's the, so it's a policy you said from the old
Board of Public
board.
Works.
So those policies, is it something this board should,
Yes.
codify or raise to a
Yes.
higher level or put some greater teeth behind? Because really, it sounds like somebody wants to open up the road, they just come see you and say, can I do it? And you kind of have
Right.
discretion then. If you're saying that sometimes you say you enforce it and sometimes you don't, then it's kind
And
of,
we'd like to have a strict policy
yeah.
from
Sounds like a
the board
guideline.
that says, here's what you're gonna do. You know?
So to speak to Mr. Falvey on one point, so wouldn't that be something that the ZBA and the board of, the planning board would also have to put into their regulations? That they would have to comply with whatever, decision that this board would make?
I don't think they have, I mean, they have to, anybody doing anything has to abide by the law. So if it were the law, it just is what it is. But
Yeah, plus the ZBA does not,
deal with the public roadway.
right, exactly.
It's private land, it stops at the property line.
Even though they do put things in there, they'll come to us first to talk about it,
Yeah.
so.
In both those instances that Rick brought up, the two projects on North Ave, 175 and 600, those developers put in their utilities, and in the case of 600, the curb cuts, prior to their approval
Yeah.
by the Board of Appeals. So they took a chance of this may not happen, but, or wait 5 years. So, I mean, we try when we can to hold fast.
No, that's good.
And I think in the last few years, we haven't seen that many.
Not as many,
No.
we had some in the past that were issues.
And what if WMGLD wants to, upgrade a gas line or something, or
It would be, if it wasn't leaking, it would be the same thing.
part of the moratorium?
Now,
Yeah.
they're probably gonna tell you they're all leaking, so.
Yeah.
But if they wanted to put in a new gas service, or they wanted to put a main in on a street that did not have gas, it would be a strict no.
Does the MLD ever do their own contracting for resurfacing of the road, or is that always done through the DPW?
We've tried to work with them to turn around and, hey, you get it, the gas main in, and we'll follow with our paving program. I guess the issue is they have so much work they need to do that it drags out a lot of the things that we want to pave. And the problem is, and I'll give you some examples, if you take, let's say Salem Street, from Daniel Road up to New Salem Street, has a gas main that's leaking, and you've heard that in the National Grid discussions. And if that project didn't go through, they're not necessarily gonna replace that main right away, even though it's leaking. Because they rate leaks 1, 2, 3, the ones come first, then the 2s, and the 3s someday. So if we went through and cold-planed and overlaid that road, the vibration, and we've had this happen in the past, the vibration from the machine will pop those leaks even more, and then they'll be replacing that whole gas main right away. That happened when we did the gas main. They told us it was all set to go. We were doing from the gas station on Lowell Street down to the railroad tracks, through the intersection, and we had the coal planer go down and mill off the surface, and next thing you know, they say, you can't pave that. The paving was all lined up, because they had to do the gas main right away. That's why you wanna try to get the gas mains done first.
Yeah. So is there something we should do to maybe elevate that? It seems like it's a driver of cost in the budget here. You have right in here that because of cuts in the roadway, the useful life of a road is shortened, which means it costs us more money. So I just wonder if we, where would we codify that? Is it in that's something we add to a town meeting to pass as a bylaw, or what's the best mechanism, or do we have something in our discretion, executive order-ish type activity, we can set a policy or a rule?
For the Tom?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, sorry.
there are a couple of ways you could handle it, either through a regulation of the board or a bylaw. I mean, a bylaw has greater dignity, so be happy to include that in an upcoming town meeting, sure.
And I could get some samples,
What other towns are doing?
different communities, and we can put together
like
something
that.
that we think's appropriate and give it to you to
Yeah, let's do that.
figure out
I
where
like
we wanna
that.
go.
Yeah.
Are we in all in agreement on? Sure, great. Ed?
I think not only that, but also take it a step further. What are the consequences or violations for those who, in fact, disturb it within the 10-year, say, assuming 10 years, the 10-year period? I think for it to have some teeth, it's not just
Yep.
a prohibition, but also the consequences of not following through, because I think that's really where the costs lie. I mean, if someone frankly wants to do it within 5 years, but is going to pay curb to curb, I don't think I would have an issue with that.
Right, we wouldn't either, yeah.
Right, but I think to have it spelled out in such a way, so it's perhaps a little bit more nuanced than just a 10-year.
It is frustrating, and we've had it a number of times that you pave a road, there's no work planned. Well, they know that something has to be done there, and, you get to 5 years in one day, and boom, you're replacing something there, because it wasn't done in the 5 years. That's why I think the right time frame is important too.
Well, it sounds like
I
also,
I don't necessarily, I used to think 5 years was good. I don't necessarily think 5 years is good anymore, so.
And how much do you sit down with, the gas and light department and say, okay, here's our plan for paving, what's your plan for main? I assume there's a good tie-off there.
We sit down probably 3 or 4 times a year.
Yeah.
They've gotten a lot better at planning out their work. Before, there really wasn't a plan there. So it's made it a lot easier, but unfortunately, they're so far behind, and with what they need to do, you can't do it all in 1 year.
Yeah.
So you have a couple of streets that have been waiting, and the streets have been in disrepair for a while. Cedar, Pleasant,
It gas me.
Gas. Did they give you any idea of how long it's?
Those aren't on the list right now. Yeah.
I mean, I know there's numbers of others. You mentioned Hopkins, and I just brought that up the other day, and if the MWRA is going to handle that.
That Prospect Street section, yeah.
Right, how about the Hopkins Street itself? Would that be part of them? Are they working on Hopkins Street, or is it
No,
Prospect?
no,
Just on Prospect?
Prospect. Yeah. Well, one thing, so you'll know, and to give you, and they've given us a lot of detail, which we use in planning when we're looking at streets. One, this is the leak list that they have. They give us that. It has all the priorities on there for grade 1, 2, and 3. The other two issues that they're looking to replace because of the potential for leaks are these here. This is cast iron, and this one's bare steel. So they're looking to get all of that out of the system to go to plastic.
Thanks.
Any other comments from the floor?
I think to your point about Hopkins, I don't know what changes are gonna be made to that road if that Tarrant Street project gets put in there, so. The Tarrant Lane,
Right.
yeah.
To how much of the road will they be liable for? Right. So,
But I mean, I think
Still back
that's,
to the question of how much money we want.
that's right.
Sorry for all that. That was a detour.
and that's where I'm, right. It was a good detour, but that's fine. So what is the flavor of the board? Ian?
Left this way. As much as I love Rick, I do think Steve's plan makes sense, and I know Steve is willing to spend money to fix things. He's not shy about doing that, but cautious. So I don't see a reason right now to go against the 350,000 with, you know, and remind us, please, next year, hopefully adding a 150 to bring it up to the 5.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, especially if we can find ways to make the roads last longer. So I'd like to accelerate a look at a bylaw change too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
10-year.
Yep.
So I do agree. I think that the roads is a high priority for a lot of us to work on the infrastructure. Doing it in 2 steps seems to be the most logical way at this time. So I would be in favor of the 350 myself at this point. Any further discussion from the, Tony?
And this doesn't take into account what National Grid may be doing either, so that's
that's
another.
correct.
Yeah,
That's right.
3 miles of roadway, I believe.
That would provide, and remember, that's still a ways out.
Yeah.
But that's gonna be about 2 miles of road.
Okay, 2 miles.
Yeah.
Ed?
I just think, in the broader context, we really have to think about where roads fall on our priority list, and I think in the coming year, it's important that we do that, because there have been complaints for a very long time about the roads, and I realize the resources issue, or absence of resources, but I'm not sure that the roads have gotten the priority, because they always seem to be kicked, the can seems to be kicked down, you know, oftentimes down the road, literally, and it's getting stuck in all the potholes now. But I think we really need to be thinking about that as a board, because it's a problem that's not going to get better over time.
Any other further comments? Peter?
I agree with Brian and Ian and Tony. This is, it's definitely going to be a priority going forward. It's always been a priority, it's just a matter of resources. And I think I have to agree with Steve, too. I just spoke with him today, and I certainly wanted a little more money than what Steve was looking for, but I think it makes sense after Steve's analysis. I have to defer to that, so I'm going to agree. We still love Rick, but it's a priority going forward. Right. So extra, yeah, so extra 150 now and extra 150 next year. I think that makes the most sense, but we'd like to make it $1 million for Rick this year, but because the roads are in tough shape, and sidewalks too. So,
That's next. One thing at a time.
I know.
If there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion then to put an article at town meeting for roadway improvements in the amount of $350,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Mr. Stinson.
Okay, the next request is for $100,000 for, and this is new sidewalks, this is not repairs. So this is places that we do not have sidewalk, that we've received requests that have come in. The town's funded a sidewalk program, began in 1995 and went to fiscal year 2002. Stopped and started up again in 2013 to 2018. And that was all because of funding, available funding. It provides new sidewalks in 2 areas, basically, school areas and heavily traveled areas. 50,000, which we've been doing the last few years. What we end up doing is we wait to the end of the fiscal year to do anything with it, and we actually combine it with the next fiscal year. So in reality, we're actually trying to, because 50,000 won't go that far on sidewalks. And a good example is the section that we did from Chapman Road to, on Salem Street, from Chapman Road to the Lowell Street intersection there. That was about 88,000, Mike?
Yeah.
So,
That's not very far.
no, not at all.
Mr. Mayo, do you have
For
this?
the same reasons as before, I would hold at the 50,000 that we've been putting in there.
Discussion from the floor. Mr. Falvey.
What are the same reasons as before, Steve? Just refresh me, because this one, well, this one I think is particularly if you're talking about sidewalks and in areas where kids are going to school and things like that, it gets really, this is more than just a nice to have. So so what's the?
I'm not sure any of those sidewalks that would be added would be in those areas, but
Okay.
maybe I'm wrong.
That's fair.
I think they're pretty well healed in the school areas. I think we took care of those years ago, but I'm looking at the whole entire budget, and I'm trying to look at, we have some good reserves. We've been judiciously using those over the last few years and replenishing them, and trying to maintain that for bond ratings. We have projects coming up and what have you. When you add everything in, this is just another one of those where I'm more comfortable at 50,000. I completely see the support, and I see Rick's case in both of them, and I sympathize. That's, when I look at the whole thing, this just helps it out.
Okay.
I know, you're not as convinced on this one, that's okay.
You're saying I don't want to spend the money. I got it.
Don't you have a plan?
And I also appreciate the fact that we could nickel and dime ourselves into bankruptcy here if we just added 50 grand to every budget that rolled through here. So I appreciate the larger sentiment. But could I ask Rick a question then?
Be my guest.
How are the sidewalks near the schools? The ones that matter for kids who walk and so forth?
For the most part, we're pretty good.
As far as
In
this
terms of,
this is
brand new.
construction. Yeah,
New.
yes, that's what I'm asking about.
You know?
Are there sidewalks that need to be constructed to
There
get
is
kids
some,
safely to
like you
school?
look at Elm Street, there are some sections there that are missing. For the senior center, when you come up Jordan Ave, there's a section there that's missing. Another area you have in Greenwood, you have on Maple Way Ave, and you have Greenwood Ave from the five-way intersection back to the Maple Way Park. There's no sidewalk there. People traveling through those areas. That's some of the areas we're looking at.
How much of that does 50 grand do?
The Greenwood Ave, Oak Street to Maple is and this was a year ago, was, what do you got here, Mike? Let me read this thing. It was, about 17, about 18,000, that was a year ago's price. The Elm Street sections, and there's a number of them, they total up to over $100,000.
Wow.
And that's because you have this grade school right up the hill from there. I mean, you could do 500,000 wouldn't be enough, so I don't know, but we don't, I kind of, with what Steve's saying is, you look at it the other way too, we haven't had them for years, not that we don't need them, but, it's kind of a catch-22.
Where do you get the most, on which street sections do you get the most phone calls, concerns, complaints from parents and so forth?
We've had
about
them
what?
on Quarter Street.
What, sorry?
Cordis is
Cordis,
one.
yeah.
And we've been looking at Cordis this year. And we talked to residents there, but we have a 50-50 split on 50% want sidewalks, 50% don't.
Oh, interesting.
So, And there was a person there that was, had a handicapped child. I don't know if he still lives there, but was really pushing for him so the person could
Sure, yeah.
get to school and stuff. But then we go out there and we do the survey and meet with people, and now we have that 50-50 split there, so, so we're kind of
So
going
we're also Cordis?
back and
and
forth.
we're-
That
so
was
you-
That was Cordis. Elm Street, we get a lot of requests for, on Elm Street. The Jordan Ave one, we get requests every year for that. And that's a small section, that one, you know, we're talking from like 48 to 56 Jordan Ave. It's about probably 22,000 for that.
Will you do that one this year?
That's the plan, yeah,
Oh, okay,
yeah.
that helps.
Before you had, Tony?
If we did put a sidewalk on Oak Street, would that in turn, we have the ability to have a crosswalk on Oak Street?
Wouldn't, not on Oak Street, going from Oak Street down to Maple Way Park,
Oh.
and going from Maple Way up Greenwood Ave to the 5-way intersection. There is a sidewalk on Oak Street that runs the entire
Yep.
length.
Yeah, it's on
But
the
it's-
north
yeah,
side.
It's not on, most streets, we only have sidewalk on one side. There are streets, a number of streets that we have a sidewalk on each side, but generally, we try to build them on one side.
And before I get to you, Maureen?
So, so I'm just gonna support, we do need more sidewalks, and not just for the kids. I actually think, I live right across from Greenwood, and just seeing the commuters, try to walk away from the snow, and at night, in the middle of the street, on some of those side streets, we need to make it more walkable, some parts of our town, beyond the downtown and some of the side streets you mentioned. And we have so many more runners. I mean, every Saturday morning, I'm seeing the marathon trainers. You know, right by Hallmark Health, they did a great sidewalk right there. It is wide, and bikes can go and kids can go. And I think as much as we can do to get more of our town to look like that. I've talked to Steve about some of the commuters. I'm shocked that nobody gets hit walking up Forest Street in the dark. There's no sidewalk on one side, Main Street on both sides. Steve loves when I talk about my walk from downtown from my place.
You should drive.
He says that to me every single time because I text him what's wrong. But Main Street is only one side there, and I just it's a you know, we're talking about walkability and livability, and by Brightview we should have. I mean, that's one area, but I just go beyond kids because I think we've covered the school. It's actually for adults and you know maybe kids on bikes where we should look at some busier intersections, but especially by the commuter rail stations.
Very good.
I don't think we can lose perspective on budgets too, because you were talking about, it sounds like at least in part, these sidewalks and school safety. I mean, I think our next meeting, we're gonna have a nearly $40 million budget that's presented to us for the schools. So I'd like to think that the school could be a little creative in sharpening its own pencils so that we can free up the monies needed for this initiative, Rick, but not at an additional cost to taxpayers, but instead realize a savings in a $40 million budget. I mean, if you're saying $100,000 or $150,000 is what's needed in and around schools or commuter paths, I'd like to think that the savings could be realized by the school budget, because that's really, that's the monster that's driving many other very small budgetary decisions. And I think that, you know, it's a whole lot easier for the school budget to absorb this sort of, you know, impact. And
So Rick doesn't do the school budget.
Right.
Just so you know.
No, I reckon, well, I guess I'm sending, I guess
That's true.
but I guess I'm messaging out then, you know, when you look at this, you know, from the perspective of, okay, tax dollars and how they're being directed, I'd like to think that we can achieve what you're looking for, greater school safety and more walkability, but also without, you know, increasing the bottom line in total. And we do look at that in total.
Peter?
Yeah, just one quick one. I know Steve had a process here for the road improvements, which we've already gone by, but he had a 75% increase, and I was thinking that he might not have finished that clause, he was thinking maybe that it might be an extra 50% increase, which would give us 75,000 as a midway point for each year, the first and second year. I was just guessing that might have been what you were thinking. There might be a
I could
transition.
think that way, Selectman May, if you like.
Okay, because I know that you didn't have a chance to finish.
That must have been it.
So another suggestion might be just to get a 50% increase each year in comparison to the 150 extra each year for the first and second year of the road improvements, which we've already gone by. That's it.
You're saying another 75 grand instead of 50?
50 to 75, right? Instead of the 100, moving from 50 to 75 for this year and next year.
I think it's,
That's palatable.
I think Steve can swing it. He always can find
Yeah,
25
there's-
grand hanging around.
you still have to replace that shed down at the lake.
Yeah. I think you don't like the metal locker?
Never happened.
Yeah, even though they painted it, right?
I have one more. This sounds like the type of thing when we talk about, walkability, commuters, schools, the stuff that is a subject of grants or federal funds or state monies. Is there special pockets? I mean, obviously, this already is covered by state funds. Are there other pockets of money, or is there some, are there grants? I know grants is always a fun thing. We'll just get a grant for it,
Years ago, we used to
Go
get,
write that.
we used to get grants for these things.
Yeah.
Now we don't. If we're paving a road under Chapter 90, we will do that sidewalk under the Chapter 90 funding. This is for areas that we're not paving and stuff, so.
Right.
Yeah, but there hasn't been a grant for sidewalks in a long time.
Yeah.
Like AARP, remember they came here? Was there any funds related to that?
I think that was a nice, really feel-good thing.
Yeah,
But
no
there was-
money
there-
attached
There was
to
no
it.
dollar attached, not at this
Should call
point.
Rep Festa
Not at
and
this
ask
point.
him.
Well,
What would the board like to do? I'll entertain a motion from the floor.
I suggest we do the 75,000 this year and next year, if everything permits. That's just part of Steve's plan that he did bring up.
Is that a formal motion?
Well, semi-formal, if everyone wants to discuss another number.
Mr.
I'd like to make a motion that we make the new sidewalk construction budget at $75,000.
So seconded.
Seconded for discussion. Any further comments on the motion?
I would just like to see the school department, see what they can do to try to offset this since it's primarily benefiting them, and that's a behemoth of a budget.
Just to clarify, and I'm not doubting what you're saying, but I thought the school sidewalks were pretty good. I thought
They are in a lot of areas.
but, so,
But there are still some sections there.
Okay.
Yeah.
sure. Steve, is that palatable?
Absolutely.
Any further discussion
Can we go back to
on the floor?
roads?
No.
Chair, what do you think?
I would have went with Marina on that to the 100,000 personally on the sidewalks, but I can live with the 75 this year. Is there any way that we could go with this in November and bring this back again instead of waiting
And
until
always
April?
bring things back in November, but you probably wouldn't spend it until later.
But the
anyway.
money would be already ready for him
Right.
to spend.
You could always, depending on how it shakes out, certainly.
Can I just make a kind of a request that maybe, instead of this being a budget time item for us to consider, that maybe we have a presentation on it earlier next year or something, right? Just to, put a little more involvement in what's a strategic plan there and get some awareness.
A workshop.
Yeah, this is kind of the back end of the cycle, so whatever, if we want to make a change, it's disruptive, right? Versus have some input on the front.
I think, and that's kind of an excellent idea, because one of the things that, and I've talked to Steve about, is really doing a workshop with all of you on our GIS system, so you can see what's there. And one of the components of that, which we have about a quarter of the town done, was all of the handicap ramps and everything and sidewalk sections. So we're working towards that, so that would be probably a good timing for that.
Yeah. I have a feeling you'd end up with a favorable result, just, yeah. Okay.
Any further comments? Motion on the floor is seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Mr. No, this would be, who's doing the mobile radio?
That's Mr. Stinson again.
Mr. Stinson.
I have no
again.
comment on this one, so.
No comment on that. Mr. Stinson, you're up again for the next item.
The request is for $125,000, $85,000 from tax levy, $20,000 from sewer, $20,000 from water, to replace the DPW radio system. Number of issues with our radio system. One, we cannot communicate with police, fire, schools, or other communities with our system, or surrounding communities. And one of the reasons is we're on a low band frequency. The police are on digital, schools on digital, fire is on ultra high band, and other communities are digital or ultra high band. Obviously has impacts related to public safety, for supporting other departments, but also for our emergency and first responders for their response. As the current radio and base station have numerous operating issues. We're actually, no matter what, have to replace all of our portable radios because they are no longer, if they work, they don't work long. And we've done things with batteries and everything, but they all need to be replaced. And it's basically important for the community and for staff, the safety of the community and staff, that we have a reliable and multi-jurisdictional communication system.
Comments from the board?
Can you do it for $100,000 and pay for the sidewalks?
I wish I could. This is actually a detailed estimate that we
Is it?
got for it, yeah.
Yeah, I move we approve $125,000 for mobile radio replacement.
I have a second.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this article request? Ed?
Maybe it's better directed to Steve, but, why isn't this falling under, under capital? Why is this coming as a warrant article?
Well, we try to do as much as we can in capital. A lot of things that we're catching up on over years. We try to take some of these big articles and do them on their own. We've done that with this. We'll have a couple more. But that's been our history. Just try to do. Also, this one has water and sewer involved in it too. We could have done that in the capital because we have some of that. But, we're trying to improve a lot of these systems, and sometimes we take it in separate articles.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. Mr. Stinson?
The last one is the water main improvement article. The request is to borrow $4,885,000 to improve water mains. The plan with this money is to clean, and I'll say the next word because it's important, and structurally line the water mains. We've done cleaning and lining in the past, many years ago, but it's not a structural line. The structural lining is important. This will do approximately 1.7 miles of water main in various sizes all over town. The borrowing will be a combination of MWRA money, pipeline funding, and town borrowing. What it means for utilizing MWRA money is that it will be a 10-year borrowing with no interest. We have, and this gets to the tricky part, we have $3,904,000 available in MWRA money. The issue is that technically you can only do, they appropriate $500,000 a year to a community. In July, we'll have $1.5 million available. However, we can send in a request to justify why we need the full 3.9, which we will do. That's our plan. Whether we will get that or not, we don't know yet. But we would be requesting the $3.9 million. At the minimum, we'd get $1.5 million from the MWRA at no interest. Water main improvement program began in 1992 and has resulted in approximately 98 mains being replaced. One thing that's happened since about 2003, we slowed down the water main replacement program. And that was because we built a new treatment plant. We redid the standpipe at about $700,000. The treatment plant was over $2.5 million. We did the meter replacement program. We put in 2 booster stations that were well over $1 million. So in balancing out all that debt, it didn't allow us to continue with the water main program. We're looking to get back into that. Many of the town's water mains are 70 years old. Over the years, you get corrosion and tuberculation in the mains. The couple advantages, and this is kind of real important, why do we want to do structural lining instead of putting in new main? One, for pipe sizes of 12 inches or less, it is probably about a 6% savings on the cost. 2, it's less obtrusive to the area. So I'm gonna dig a pit that's still gotta run temporary main the whole length, but I'm gonna dig a pit at probably, say, point X, and I'm gonna go 500 to 1,000 feet farther and dig another pit. I'm not digging up the whole street. Really speeds up the time of getting the project done. So it's a lot less obtrusive to it. Lot less traffic issues with it. Also will reduce the cost of traffic control because you're not out there as long. We can do services without digging up to 4 inches, which is important. Anything below 4 inches, we would still have to excavate a little bit. Areas that there are contamination, and we have one area which is on Foundry Street where they have that contamination that runs with the groundwater. If we were to dig that up completely, it would be costly. This will be a lot less costly to do Foundry Street, which we've been trying to do for a number of years. So those are some of the benefits with doing a structural lining. And it's a lining that basically you could put in the ground, and if there were no rocks on top of it or other impacts, you could just leave that there. But you put it through the existing pipe, and the existing pipe will really protect that lining. Has a lot less friction in the pipe because it's a smooth liner. So,
Questions from the board? Brian?
Just, so you said that the interest-free loan from MWRA is $3.9 million for 10 years, potentially. And then you said we're going to ask for it. I'm not sure if we're going to get it. So I have a couple of questions on that. One, you're not totally unsure if you're going to get it. I'm sure you've talked to them or have some indication we're probably going to get it.
they indicated we could submit a justification letter for it. We know we're gonna get 1.5 million.
Yeah.
We wanna get the 3.9, so we'll.
Yeah, what would you peg the likelihood of getting the 3.9 based on history and the conditions and the situation?
Right, when you look at the program, by this July, it'll be 1.5 million. Then each July going on, they keep adding $500,000. And if you take a look at some of the projects that Rick's talking about, is up around the standpipe on Delaware, Green Street, Upland Road. These are really, you can go to them and say it's a critical need. It's part of the infrastructure that's almost 100-year-old cast iron. And by redoing this, we assure the pressure, the supply, and they're reasonable if you go in with a good justification.
So you're taking an extra 5 years out of $500,000 a year of money to get the extra $2.5 million to get to $4 million, I'm rounding, right? Is that, okay, and so it's likelihood they'll probably do that? Because my other question is, if they don't do it, well, then your whole idea of spending $4 million-ish on water mains, do you then fund it through the other borrowing mechanisms, which were, I think you said there was a pipeline fund and
Well, pipeline fund is the MWRA money.
Okay, all right, and then you said the town would just be
So
borrowing.
the town it would be interest, and when you look at our debt schedule, which you have in the water budget, where did I put that?
Yeah, but that's, you wouldn't scale back the project, you would scale up the bar, that's all I'm trying to figure out.
It would increase the cost of the project.
we'd shift the borrowing to
Okay.
an interest one. And when you look at our debt schedule,
Your
we
debt
begin to
expiring.
have a lot of debt falling off
Right.
in the next 4 years. Starting with next year, we have 76,500 drops out. And then we have, and the
That's a debt
amount,
service payment of 76,500, you're
yeah.
saying drops out, which
That
equates
drop-
to a larger capital
right,
amount.
so now, so that can then be
Yeah.
reallocated
Yep.
to this payback, which is, you know, if you divide by 10, it's $400,000 and change. So that would go to that. Then we have another year later, we have some booster station of 50,000 dropping off, so it'll start to go down. Remember, our reserve is not that high on the wall side.
Yeah.
So the impact to the rate could be as much as 55 cents, depending on stuff dropping out. I haven't factored that in. But if you just did it and planned on paying it from the rate, it's about 55 cents per 100 cubic feet. That would end up being about, what was it? $59.40 a year to an average bill. Okay, so some people would pay more the more
Yep.
they use, but an average bill. So it's about a $60 cost. But it buys us a lot that in a short time is gonna really pay back and actually reduce costs later on.
What's the cost of a water main break?
Well,
I saw a stat, it was
the-
about
the
17
one-
of them last year.
yeah, which is pretty low. I
Calendar
mean, we're
year.
really low. We wanna
Okay.
keep it that way. Back in 15 years ago, we were up around over 30.
Yeah.
So we're pretty low.
But if there were
The-
20,
but
what's
you
the-
take a break, you know, you get a break that's on Cedar Street. Pretty easy to handle, small. You take a break on a 20-inch main or a 16-inch main, you have, one, the damage that it's caused from those mains, and they probably could go from $100,000 to $200,000 to repair just that break.
Right.
But
And so we
kind
had
of pave
17 of
and-
those last year, and what you're saying is we want to put some money into basically making sure these don't happen or these are mitigated. So it probably pays for itself every year, right out of the gate.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because you're going to target the mains that are most likely to break.
Yeah. Right.
So it's almost, this is a net win from a financial perspective and super smart, so, okay.
So I have a question before I go to, so when you said you were going to line them right now, what's going to be the reduction on the interior dimension?
There's a small reduction, but it's not gonna impact anything. There is.
Because you
but
do have
remember, if you-
buildup on the inside, all the
But if you have,
pipes.
if you have tuberculation in there,
Mm-hmm.
and you will with an old domain that's cast iron, if you have a buildup in there, you're gonna eliminate that, put this in, you're gonna still gain space. And I'll pass this around, this,
But you're not boring the pipe, though. First, you're just putting the sleeve through.
no, they go in and they clean the pipe first.
Oh, they clean it first,
Yeah,
and then they put
And then they
the...
put the sleeve in, yeah,
Okay,
okay?
I wasn't, okay. Thank you.
And you find, Boston has gone to that the last couple years. And there's been other places around the country that have been doing it for years. Boston just did it, they had good success with it, and then they're looking to do more.
Very good. No?
From a lifespan perspective, you're talking about putting liners in like 100-year-old plus pipes. How does that compare in terms of reliability going forward? The lifespan of, say, the lining versus, say, replacing the pipe itself?
The lining, and remember, structural lining is fairly new. So right now, it's rated for 50 years. They think it will go much longer, but they've been conservative on 50 years. A lot of pipes have gone 100 years, but usually it's a lot less than that. But ductile iron, they'll tell you to go 100. I haven't seen one that goes 100 years yet, because they all have issues, so.
Because I'm just thinking, because you mentioned like the lining would almost be a standalone if it weren't for the fact that rock could compromise it and other things. I'm thinking if you put this, like, lining through 100-year-old pipe, and then the pipe becomes compromised, say the pipe cracks or otherwise, compromises the lining, are you ultimately in improving reliability.
The pipe cracking's won't be an issue. Remember that when you have a break, it's from the water pressure on the inside that's pushing out on a weak spot. That water pressure is pushing out on the liner, which is not weak, okay? So you're not gonna, even if it did push out the steel on the outside, the line is still gonna protect it there. Okay? So you won't have that issue.
So you expect a liner in a 100-year-old pipe would still provide reliable water transmission for 50 years?
Correct. 50 years or more.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, projected, I guess, right, because it's
Yeah.
new technologies.
Right.
Any further comments from the floor? I'll entertain a motion then to approve this article.
I just have one on the motion. So our numbers in front of us say 4085. I think you led off by saying 4885. What's the right?
4085.
Oh, you said
Yeah.
4885 when you started.
so-
Sorry. Yeah. It's just,
Well, you can do that.
yeah. Of course, I was going to make it.
You want to give me $800,000
Well, I was
more?
going to make it 4060 and take 25 grand off. So I'm trying to find it somewhere, Steve. So I'll make a motion that we approve 4085 000. $4,085,000.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Mr. Stinson, one last one.
One last item.
You-
You have a request for a $300,000 overdraft before you. If not used, it will not impact the next year's tax rate. It's the first time I ever had to go to the Finance Committee with two of these at one shot because of the storms that happened after the last one was approved. We are about 1,136,000 when I calculated that. It's up a little bit now because we had another storm after I did this. It's always the April Fool's Day storm, okay? And there's been storms in May and June. So I hope none happen, but you never know. So, and so we're recommending $300,000. We currently, when you look at the sheet on the back, well, no, I think you guys got them both. I don't have, Steve didn't have them here, but we're over on the first 300,000, so.
Any discussion? No, I'll entertain a motion then to approve the snow and ice overdraft of $300,000 as requested by DPW.
Second.
Moving discuss, any discussion on the motion?
No.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Stinson, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You and
Thanks,
your
Robert.
Have a
entire
good night.
staff, thank you.
Good job, right?
So we're going to,
Is that my sheet?
So-
You hit F and G and then David Watts gets it. Oh, okay.
F and G. What's G? What's F, what's G? I don't have G. Will you have the old? Oh, because here's Brendan. Okay, so, let's, take care of, items F and G while we're here. A request from the library to accept and expend the gifts to the library in the amount of $1,148 from various donors with thanks.
So moved.
Moving second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. A request to accept and expend the gift or gifts to the Wakefield World War II Memorial Fund in the amount of $25 from Joanne Gutierrez with thanks.
So moved.
Second.
Move second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'm being asked to move into item A, request from the Human Rights Commission. Mr. Watts, could you please sit down and put your plea before us?
Okay, I sent you two requests in two letters. The first is to change the term of appointment for the clergy commissioner from 3 years to 1 year. And the reason we're requesting this is because our current clergy commissioner, Reverend Glenn Mortimer of the Methodist Church, has found it very difficult with his schedule, especially when things come up at the last minute, to be as fully engaged as he wanted to in the commission. So in meeting with him last December, the proposal was made to change it from 3 years to 1 year. He went back to the clergy council. They agreed wholeheartedly, and that would mean if the board accepts it, that they would be getting a recommendation for a different commissioner for the next year to be appointed next month.
I move that we extend the term for the clergy representative of the Human Rights Commission to 1 year. Change it.
Change it, yes. Moved and seconded, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Makes sense.
Okay, the second request is to add this year a second commissioner when the letters of application are presented to the Board of Selectmen. I'm making a similar request to the school committee for a school, an additional school committee commissioner. Basically, the Wakefield Human Rights Commission has been more successful than any of us ever imagined. We're getting involved in more things very quickly, and we just don't have enough commissioners to handle the workload. We had contemplated adding 2 commissioners a year, one from the school committee, one from the selectmen over the next 3 years. What we're going to do right now is add 1 from each if accepted, and then look at where we're at next year. We are also trying to get a larger volunteer organization behind us too. That's a little harder to do. But for right now, we're looking to expand the commission by 1 commissioner appointed by the Board of Selectmen.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the request from the Human Rights Commission to extend it by 1 commission.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Excellent.
Watts.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Will we add that to the list on here? No. Okay. So right now, let's get Mr. Lieber up here.
Yeah. I'm gonna be loud. You can't hear you.
Where is he? Daniel. No.
Good evening. I'm here as Chair of the Wakefield Bylaw Review Committee. I am joined by 2 of my esteemed colleagues. We've got Mr. McCoubry, and we also have Mr. Vincent, who have also decided to join us here in the gallery. We've been very busy at work. I sent the board a letter that explained some of the work that we've been doing. I've also prepared a presentation which can also help for those who are watching the meeting to understand some of the Bylaw Review Committee's recommendations. This will be similar to a presentation we plan to deliver at town meeting to help explain what the work has been, what we're actually doing. This is an interim report. We're not done. We still have quite a bit of work left to do. Mr. Mullen has been extraordinarily helpful. He's attended most of the 25 meetings and has put in countless hours writing, rewriting, revising, continue to revise additional articles. In the end, we've had 20 individual articles that we've recommended, and we have consolidated those down to 5 for town meeting itself. We've received input from many different sources. This has been individual citizens. We've received input from many town committees. We've received input from leaders in the town, many departments. Mr. Stinson was very helpful on several of the articles. We've also received input from the Chamber of Commerce. We had a meeting that we did additional advertising for with the help of Mr. Mayo to get additional feedback on March 14th. That was successful. We did get some additional feedback from townspeople on some of the articles which will be discussed. So to try and go through this quickly. The first article, which is, for lack of a better term, Omnibus Article Part 1. The purpose of this article is to remove 4 chapters and 1 section of a chapter that really are no longer necessary for the actual town to function. Some of these are redundant. They've been made redundant by the charter through state law and other purposes. An example of that is Chapter 43 on the personnel bylaw. The personnel bylaw is no longer a function of the bylaw itself by our charter, which was adopted after the bylaw. That's now in a function of the town administrator. So the town administrator sets all of those components. So there's no need for the bylaw at all in its case. In addition, there are 3 chapters that have language clarifications. These are really to make the bylaws easier to read. As Mr. Mullen has learned firsthand, this committee is extraordinarily detail-oriented. So we took things and we tried to get clarity of language, such as in Chapter 62, where the word treasurer was used in one place, town treasurer in another, and we tried to make it very consistent so that when you read one sentence to another sentence, it actually flows better. And so now the word will be just treasurer instead of town treasurer. We also added a lot of commas, and then more commas.
And I'm so
Some of these
excited
commas are
about
actually very important.
Oxford.
For the Oxford comma, which has an Oxford comma in that
I'm a
particular
huge
line.
fan of the Oxford comma.
Did you see the lawsuit?
Yes.
Absolutely. That was just over a year ago in May.
Yes.
In fact, that actually affected one of our bylaws. It affected the alcohol bylaw, Chapter
interesting.
78.
Oh, wow.
It actually affected the readability.
Yeah.
In its current wording, could very easily be interpreted in a way that is not intended. So the commas help to correct that situation. We're in none of these changes. We're trying to make any sort of policy statements.
Put your hands up. Right here.
I love the Oxford comma.
In addition,
Can I suggest nobody talk about semicolons in front of Dan?
yeah, we tried to avoid those. So we also have updates that really are just to match current practice, such as in Chapter 17, 21, 36, and 142. Chapter 17 is on town council. So the idea here is to explicitly give town council the ability to hire other town councils. Other council is necessary. That's been a current practice. This makes it very specific that is allowed. It also codifies in Wakefield an unusual situation where town council has the authority to help the school committee. That's not typically done. That way it codifies it both for our current town council, Mr. Mullen, but also for future town councils
And of
as
course,
well.
did you write the pronunciation? You really have to say council.
Honestly.
And for Chapter 36, which deals with town meeting, moving on from that, we're actually adding additional language changing from the archaic version in the required current bylaw of may the question now be put. To move a question, we now allow for I move the question by bylaw so that it's very specific and we won't have a moderator that will force someone to use language that is not current. So that's everything in this first omnibus article. The second omnibus article are what we consider to be really minor updates. This includes things such as in Chapter 1, it allows for email notifications, which as opposed to everything having to be mailed or handed to people, as long as there is feedback from a person that they received a notice. So that way you're not going to get, well, what we sent an email, but the person didn't receive it. It's designed, all these changes are designed to be very much in line with the current practices, as well as updating things to be more reasonable, such as the fines will be changed to be a staggered and fairly consistent $100, $200, $300 per violation. First violation, $100. Second violation, third and subsequent violations, $300, which is the maximum per current state law. Chapter 51, the annual report, changes the timing as well as includes sections for things such as the Veterans Department and the Human Rights Commission. So it adds those into that. Chapter 75 On alarms, clarifies who the administrator for alarms is. It just changes where that wording is to make it more readable. Similarly with Chapter 112 on E911. For both Chapter 75 and 112, there were actually fees that were in that had not been collected, really were unnecessary for someone to appeal a potential fine. They had to pay a fee. It didn't seem to make sense. So we went ahead, removed that language, removed the associated language for it as well. Earth removal, we've specified the Zoning Board of Appeals as the appropriate board. It referenced a county commissioner that does not exist anymore. Chapter 119 is kind of a fun one on fees. We removed many fees, including the cattle weighing fee. Yes, we actually did have on the books right now, we have a $2 cattle weighing fee, and our town clerk, Betsy Sharon, has said that she will absolutely take on that responsibility at the town common whenever requested. We also have a bicycle registration fee. That is going away as well, and there are other fees that are being adjusted to be more consistent with current needs. In addition to that, the building fees are technically included just to correct something.
Can I jump in on one thing? On the
Sure.
fees, we noticed this afternoon that a fee that we do charge now that needs to be added is entertainment fee. And I know that you have automatic amusement devices, but for live entertainment, there is a fee for that too. So, sorry.
That can be handled.
And that should be at $100
administratively
at least?
town meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
So I don't anticipate that'll cause a
Okay.
problem at town meeting for that. The one fee that we struggled with, it was the fee for fortune tellers. We didn't feel that we should print the fee because a good fortune teller obviously will know what the fee is.
I've been saying that for years.
So, in addition to that, we also, for Chapter 138 for Lake Quannapowitt, we corrected a typo, referenced the wrong chapter. In addition, updated the language to accommodate newer technology such as electric boats, so that we won't get fast electric boats that don't have a horsepower rating on there. It's really preemptive to support the spirit of the bylaw, while it has not been a current problem. There's been a very specific committee that's been working on a lot of different things. Now we get to the three independent articles. These are in three specific chapters. First is Chapter 9 on governance. Chapter 9 has a lot of different changes in it. The first section of those changes really just updates the language for consistency with state law. It also updates the Finance Committee vacancy appointments so that it's consistent with the charter, and appoints a committee of 3 people, which includes the moderator, the chairman of the Finance Committee, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, to appoint any vacancies that are there. In addition, it changes the Permanent Building Committee from a current 9-member Permanent Building Committee to 6 members that are consistent, and 3 members that are appointed for each project that are appointed by the user agency. So if the user agency is, say, for public safety, that'll be appointed by the Board of Selectmen, who appoints the other 6 members as well, but 3 people specifically for that purpose. The idea here is to support the idea of consistency of a permanent building committee, so you have consistent skills that move forward. In addition, we have the user agency that actually has a voting, but although albeit a non-majority voting party to this.
So, real quick, so if you had a few projects going on, you could have multiple iterations or forms of the permanent building committee?
Correct.
You know,
Each
these 9,
project
those 9,
gets
yeah.
technically an advisory committee, which actually is what would do the voting for it.
Yeah.
Mr. Mullen did some magical wording in there so that it's actually surprisingly clear in the actual
Yeah.
language.
Cool.
The 6 members do actually have a responsibility, and that is to set their own rules for the permanent building committee. In addition, it adds a consistency of governance process. There's a series there's a whole new section to the bylaw itself. And what this does is really just sets expectations and makes it very reasonable for people who are getting into governance and how governance works, so that there's some consistency across the various boards, committees, commissions, councils throughout the town. So multiple member bodies shall use Robert's Rules of Order. They have the ability to designate the chair and potentially change the chair if there is a need. There's a specific process for that, so that there isn't a there isn't something that happens without notice, but it makes it so that if a chair is inefficient, that a board has the ability to change it. And it also defines quorum. This becomes very important when you have unfilled positions, so it makes it so that under the open meeting law, you actually will have a quorum. If there's, say, only 13 or 15 members that have actually taken the oath of office, your quorum is now based on 13 instead of the full 15. So that's an example. Meeting minutes are made more accessible by the public. They must be sent into the town clerk, and if a particular body has a website, does not mandate they create one, but if they have a website, it states that they shall post them to their website upon approval as well, and that all bodies shall review at least annually any executive session minutes to see if the executive session is still needed, the executive session purpose. An interesting thing that we added was an attendance requirement for appointed bodies. This does not affect elected boards such as yours, but for appointed bodies, because the work does need to get done, if someone consistently misses meetings, specifically 5 in a row, then they will have vacated the position. This does not require that the Board of Selectmen or any other appointing board take an action. It is an automatic vacancy by right. And so that way it can be filled. It can actually be filled by the same person should they so request it. There's nothing that prohibits a person from being put back into it. There are ways that a person can be a part of it. It can be a part of the process in that process. The whole goal is if someone just doesn't show up to meetings, that they are not taking a slot from someone else who wants to be there.
So if someone had a long-term health issue and couldn't make it, meetings for, 2 or 3 months, they could be taken off the committee, but again, put back in once their
Absolutely.
health recovered, okay.
And in fact, they could, provided that the chair allowed for, they could actually call in to that meeting to be a part of it, and that would count as attendance for this purpose. So specifically for this purpose. So the idea that someone who may be infirmed has the ability to participate has been accommodated. But if someone just isn't able to do the work and isn't able to be around for months at a time, and there's meetings that need to be done, it's provided. In addition, for the adjudicating bodies, if they miss 5 meetings over the course of any 12-month period, the Board of Selectmen has the ability to deem them as having vacated their position. So for the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Conservation Committee, if there's a particular member that is not actually showing up for meetings, it does give the ability to have that position opened up. So the idea is to have people be a part of this. There is some relation to the next topic on the agenda, which talks about remote participation as well. There's also a designated purpose of appointed bodies, so that that all parties, whether that be the appointing body, which in many cases is of course your board, or other appointing boards, they actually document what the roles, responsibilities, the terms for the membership are, and that is actually given to people when they actually are appointed to a body. That way people and the town know what the actual boundaries are for different bodies, and this will also keep the bodies in line, so if they exceed their authority, it becomes rather obvious. It also specifies some minimum requirements for public hearings, so that if a citizen wishes to speak, they have the right to speak. The board does not have to accept their comments in the sense that they don't have to agree with them, but it allows someone and guarantees that every citizen has the right to speak at a public hearing. That way, we don't get a situation where a hearing is held and a chair moves to close the public hearing before people have the right to speak. So those are the changes to Chapter 9, and it's really designed to make sure that everyone in town has the ability to have their voices heard. Yes?
Yeah, I like the public hearing, right, making sure that, at a public hearing, right,
Correct.
that's an important distinction between other types of meetings, but at a public hearing, you're talking about?
There's exclusive to public hearings, not public meetings.
Right, okay. Right, that's really important.
It's very specific because public hearings are designated by law.
Right.
Public meetings, which are also designated, but this is a public meeting.
Yeah, public meeting is
up to the discretion of the
public's
chair.
welcome to watch the board deliberate or take whatever action it's going to, and a public hearing is actually, we're seeking input and.
Correct. It also, by bylaw, will give the chair the authority to shut someone down should they find the need and desire to do so after 5 minutes.
What, yeah, is 5 minutes the?
5 minutes is the amount that's
Yeah,
been
because you can
designated.
filibuster or something, I mean, it would get crazy.
That's the
Trust me.
idea.
Yeah,
After
okay.
5 minutes, they can be shut down.
Good.
Chapter 104, yes, it is a cute puppy. Chapter 104 is on animals, as we've got people looking. This updates the language to the animal bylaw, makes it more consistent with state law that was updated in 2012. It also adds biting in public as a specific violation. As of currently stands, that is not a violation within the town. There's state law that covers biting, but the town bylaw will take precedence over. It changes the fines to be $50 for a first violation, $200 for a second violation, $300 for subsequent violations, regardless of the type of violation. This way, if someone makes a mistake effectively, they may get a fine, but a $50 fine is not intended to be punitive to the point where it really hurts someone. But if someone makes a mistake more than once, they will obviously be aware of it. And the first time, the animal control officer will let them know that, okay, we're only giving you a $50 fine. Second time, next time it will be more significant. It also corrects a discrepancy in the current bylaw that does not allow dogs to be off-leash anywhere within the town of any place, including the dog park, which kind of defeats the purpose of having a dog park. So it specifically allows the Board of Selectmen, or whatever the board shall be named at that time, to actually have off-leash areas, the designated dog parks. It does not limit it to one, it can be additional areas. So should the board in the future decide to designate an area of, say, Sullivan Park or somewhere else in town as a dog park, it has the ability to do so, and that then it would be effectively permitted for people to have their dog off-leash in that area. As of now, the only place that I'm aware of that's been designated a dog park is the section on Main Avenue, on Main Street. And the last one. Mr. Stinson and this board spent a whole lot of time talking about snow and ice and roads. Well, we get to talk about it again. Snow and ice has been effectively completely rewritten. We took a look at the current bylaw, and after 4 meetings discussing the current bylaw and ways to potentially tweak it and modify it, it turned out that the current bylaw, which only covers certain sides of certain streets in certain sections of town, mostly downtown, that it was not workable to meet the current needs of the town. And so we actually took the best of bylaws from many different towns, put them together, and came up with a complete replacement for 175 Section 8 and a minor update to 175-9. This will actually cover all commercial property and large multifamily dwellings. It does not affect individual single-family residences and small multifamilies. But what it does do is it puts a requirement for those large commercial properties and smaller commercial properties as well, and large multifamilies that's defined as 5 or more units. It's the complete inverse to those properties that are currently eligible for trash and recycling collection. And you'll see that there's a connection to that in a moment. It's the inverse for that particular specification. There's a violation for those 12 hours after the stopping of snow, ice, precipitation, so that it doesn't require that someone or a shopkeeper have to hire someone in the middle of a storm to clear the snow. When we get 24 inches like we did a few weeks ago, that would be impractical. 12 hours after the storm, the sidewalks need to be clear. In addition to the sidewalks, the curb cuts, the crosswalk areas also need to be clear. So this will actually increase compliance. It increases the walkability that this board was talking about earlier today. It makes it so that even if the plow creates a berm next to a commercial property, there is a requirement that that berm be opened up for the crosswalk. That becomes a requirement, and that's very specific in there. It also adds the DPW as an enforcement agent in addition to the police. This was done actually at the recommendation of both the police and DPW. And the reason for it is the police tend to be overworked and very busy with other types of activities during the storms. DPW already has supervisors that are out there, and they know which properties do not get trash collection, therefore would be covered. So it actually becomes very easy for them to figure out whether this is an issue. They'll work with Mr. Mullen and Mr. Mayo to come up with the appropriate ticketing forms and how to handle violations.
Quick question on that.
The fines will be $200 per violation.
Who's responsible for the cleanup? I assume it's the property owner, not necessarily.
The property owner is responsible.
Right. So it's,
which is a change. Right now, the current language says it's the owner or the tenant or the occupant this makes it to the property owner.
Yeah, and let them figure out who they want to push it to in their
If
leases
they
and whatever.
wish to have other provisions in their leases or other components, that's up to them.
That's good.
In opening to the crosswalks, you're putting on the owners as well?
Yes. If it abuts their property. The crosswalks that need to be opened, ADA compliance requires that we actually have a usable sidewalk. If a person can't get to a sidewalk, it does not make it to be particularly usable. And we have seen that quite extensively throughout the town, where you have a sidewalk and it's boxed in. You have to walk on snow to get to it. Someone who has a mobility device finds that very, very difficult.
So do you have a minimum width for compliance?
36 inches,
Yeah,
or
right.
the width of the sidewalk, whichever is
Look,
less.
okay.
Good question. It's the ADA compliance in here. It also updates the fine for depositing on public ways. That's 175-9 to $300. That's in the case of typically it would be a snowplow that takes snow from one side of the street, deposits it on the other. That would still be enforced by the police. That's a $300 fine. Hopefully that will be enough that if a plow driver actually gets hit with that fine, they won't get hit, they won't ever want to do it again. $300 fine is usually significant enough that they won't want to do it in the first place. The Chamber of Commerce was consulted on these. We specifically reached out to them. They agreed that this should not have a negative impact on shop owners and that most are already compliant. So 25 meetings later, we are not done. We still have quite a few left. Among the things that are in here, you may notice there is nothing to do with zoning. We've specifically deferred all zoning-related issues to be handled at a later time, and at this time, the only thing with zoning we might even touch would be solely to do with cleaning up language that does not impact, have any policy impacts whatsoever. That's been a very specific, explicit decision that the committee has made.
Well, thank you very much, Daniel. A very detail-oriented report.
Can you, I kind of missed the first, who's on that committee?
There are seven members on the current committee, and we have elected members such as Cindy Schatz, who's also a library trustee. We have new volunteers such as Mr. Vincent, who has actually joined us here tonight. We have people who've been involved in the town for many years, such as Mr. McCoubry, and there are other volunteers as well.
That's great. I know the kind of work that is in the debates you can have over the wording on one sentence, let alone all of those sections and so
Steve
forth.
said that's how sausage is made.
Yeah, it's a long,
The running
it's a long
joke
process.
is come on.
Yeah.
I'll see a T-shirt in the future.
Yeah, nice job.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's great. I used to watch you guys at Charter Review, and you guys met a lot more than we did, so thank you. I also just want to comment that it's full circle. My first meeting, we had a woman whose child was bit by the dog.
Right.
And we said we couldn't do anything but go to bylaw, so thank you for addressing that. So 11 months later, we're on the way, so thank you.
That was great. Super easy to follow. Very, very well done. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say it was a pleasure working with all the members and including especially the chairman. I've never dealt with people who were more detail-oriented and dedicated.
Ed, did you?
Just a couple questions I had for you on that. So first off, thank you and the committee for the commitment. I mean, 25 meetings in a volunteer capacity is phenomenal, and I appreciate that commitment to our town. In going through, I recognize all the changes are very specific, but the challenge that I had in looking at everything before this meeting was context, and it almost felt like I was reading the red lines of a document, but not the document itself. And so I don't know to what extent you've discussed this or would make available to the public, perhaps online or whatever the case is, the language as it currently stands and how you're proposing to revise it, so you can have a better understanding of, where these changes fit in the context of the broader chapters that you're referencing. Because you make reference to deleting sections, 1 through 5, for example. That's probably completely reasonable and appropriate, but I don't know what sections 1 through 5 are. And I realize that there's a lot of content, obviously, and these are the red lines to it, but if there's some mechanism to convey that to the town, I think that's an important aspect of it.
I appreciate the question, and the committee actually had an extensive discussion on exactly that point at our last meeting as we were preparing these final, the final components of the presentation. And we agree with the sentiment, and anything that the town administrator or the town council can do to make the presentation and more importantly, the preparation for people to be easy to understand what those changes are is helpful. The language is required, I know, just so that the warrant is reasonably clear and is not completely obnoxiously long.
I think if we had a sidecar for this, so someone who was interested in knowing, okay, this is the language, so how does that impact as it's currently written? I think that'd be helpful. The other piece was on the dog, the dog fines for the bites. I actually think $50 is not very much for a dog bite, and I understand the idea of disincentivizing someone, and I appreciate the jump, but I think in the initial instance, more than $50 is probably appropriate so that people are aware that they're going to be more proactive and, all right, I need to make sure that I have I need to be more responsible with my pet, understanding that there are significant consequences. I don't know that $50 is, it's not ideal, but that first, meeting when we had the woman here talking about a child, I mean, the child was, severely impacted by it, and I don't know, I just think $50 is a little bit of a throwaway. I'd like to see that amount higher personally. And then finally, with the snow removal, I think especially this winter, I've noticed like any number of residences private residences that haven't shoveled themselves out. And days later, I happen to be on a route where people go to the commuter rail, so I see it, a lot more. And there's certain, even on my own street, where there's a sidewalk that is not shoveled or plowed at all until it melts. And so I'm not going to second guess what you've done because you've obviously spent a lot of time thinking through these issues, but I do think that it's something that as a board we should continue to think about because I think it is a problem. And I appreciate, the businesses doing their part, but I think residents have to do their part. Maybe the 12 hours is a little bit ambitious if you have, say, an elderly person who needs to try to figure that out, but I do think some responsibility on the property owners of smaller dwellings is necessary here. Thank you.
There's an SJC case that speaks to that. I mean, if someone wants to bring something against a resident, the SJC has said you're responsible for clearing in front of your house.
And I recognize that ultimately there are liability issues, that are created by not clearing, certainly. Right. I just think that if, we're doing it more from a reasonable encouragement perspective, so people, are better neighbors, I think that makes a difference.
From a practical perspective, both issues that you brought up actually were discussed at length in the committee. So first on the fine structure for animals. It is different than the rest of the fine structure. The rest of the fine structure is $100 for the first offense. Part of the reason that for animals that it's a $50 offense for the first offense itself is the balancing of what the offense is and the fact that to get to a second offense you have to actually have a ticket issued for the first offense. So the actual fine has to be levied. If the fine is so high initially, then there will be a pressure on the animal control officer to not issue it in the first place or not have it adjudicated and so forth. So the $50 is trying to balance that particular aspect. It's currently $25. And so the $50 brings it more in line with where things are, and the animal control officer will have the ability to issue that fine without having, where it's typically issued in person, it won't cause the discomfort. Most violations tend to be leash law violations.
I was going to say, it's not the dog bite fine, it's the animal fine
control
schedule.
Right.
Dog bite is one of them, so there's a lot of smaller offenses that you don't want to jack somebody up for, but you would like to see some teeth, no pun intended, in the enforcement.
I just think that just feels to me like far more consequential. I mean, we heard the story, before this board, but, a dog bite is very rarely not consequential. It's often involving a child. It's often involving a traumatic experience. It often involves stitches. And I'm a dog. I'm a pet parent myself, so I'm not. It's nothing against pet parents, but it's something against irresponsible pet parents. And I'd really just like to see us really bulk that up, because I think that that's the biggest issue. I understand the leash law and all that. Those are also important components. But, you know, I think I have a particular sensitivity to if someone is bit by a dog.
Are there any other discussions regarding the presentation presented to us? I'll entertain a motion then to,
We don't need one.
we don't need one? Not on this?
Presentation, right?
It's an interim report.
Ah,
I'm not sure if
very
there's
good.
action required to
No.
actually add the items to the warrant,
No.
because they're
Wait,
submitted.
that's right too, okay.
Yeah. Nice job then.
Yeah,
Very good job,
Thank
very
you
good
very
job.
much.
So,
Brian, thank you.
Have them stay up there.
stay right where you are, sir. Do you want to speak to this now, or would you have him make your presentation, sir?
Thank you. So second part of the presentation is the authorization of remote participation. A few weeks ago, we sent this board a letter requesting that you specifically authorize remote participation by multiple member bodies in the town. That is something that is specifically authorized by the open meeting law, and it would allow for members of boards to participate remotely when they have the means, opportunity to do so, and it is also available to the town itself. The one exception to that is the Commission on Disabilities Issues, which currently does actually use remote participation from time to time for members, and they're specifically authorized by state law to do so. It has been used by other groups, including actually the Charter Commission, to have people effectively listen and participate remotely at the discretion of the chair. They just were not legally allowed to be marked present. They were not legally allowed to vote at that particular meeting. So the ability to permit the participation will allow for members who may not be able to attend a meeting for any reason that is important to them. Most common would be illness or infirmity of a family member that they need to take care of. Could also be a business trip. There are a variety of reasons, having served on boards in both elected and appointed positions, where I would love to be at a meeting, but a business trip is taking me to another location, and so it becomes impractical. But I do have the ability to call in or participate by web conference, whatever the technology happens to be. The law was updated originally in 2010 to allow for this. The regulation was just updated last October to make it more amenable to current needs. And among those changes is the fact that it doesn't require that the chair state why a person is participating remotely. It just allows for it. It still requires that a quorum be present in person. The chair or person acting as chair must be in person. So that way there's always an in-person presence. The meeting must still be posted. It must still undergo all of the same rigors as any other public meeting. But it does allow for people to participate. For the adjudicating bodies, such as Zoning Board of Appeals and Conservation Commission, it will not be counted as an absence by a member who is allowed to participate remotely. That can actually have a significant benefit on people who can be actually excluded from votes if they miss 2 or more sessions of a hearing. So it can actually have a significant impact on having the regular members of those boards actually be able to participate more fully. Again, if someone has the ability to participate in person, they're naturally going to want to do so for 2 reasons. One, you get a more full experience in person, and 2, you get the collaboration in person. So it's not something that I actually would see someone wanting to say, oh, I don't want to participate. If someone truly doesn't want to participate, the recommendation would be that they withdraw themselves from that particular body.
Dan, can I ask you?
Sure.
Is it up to the chair to decide what's a unreasonably difficult reason to not show up? And could boards have different thresholds of that?
Not really.
It would be the person who's not showing up to determine that?
It's the person who's not showing up to be what's unreasonably difficult. But it is up to the chair to decide whether to make the accommodations for remote participation.
Oh, I see, okay, that
or
I guess
not.
that was my question. Okay.
And that's where there is a distinction. Because if remote participation isn't available, the person cannot participate. there are requirements, such as if it's using a telephonic device, so it's a speakerphone. There happens to be one in the second floor conference room, it's at Town Hall, that gets used on a fairly frequent basis. It has to be able to be listened by all the attendees as well as the audience in the room. It's a fairly common requirement. And all votes at that point have to be by roll call so that you can know when the person votes or not. The requirements are fairly straightforward. They're spelled out in the regulation. And there's no required cost to the town. Allowing it does not force any bodies to do it. Bodies do not have to do it. It merely permits them to do it. And they have to figure out what is actually allowed. And if it turns out it's not desired, the board would have the ability to revoke that decision as well. Yes.
This is tremendous. I don't know if everybody immediately gets the full import of this. So on something like the zoning board, which you mentioned, or the Concom, you know, if you have a hearing like Shaw's or CVS or something that goes on for months, and that petitioner is coming back literally for months at different times. They might come back, you know, one night and then they get sent to do a revision on architectural diagrams, and they come back 3 months later. It could be a year or something like that. I mean, Shaw's, we had, you know, this is over 10 years ago. I think it was 10 months of meetings, and if you missed 2 for whatever reason, you couldn't vote on it. And so then your board got smaller, it changed your, it gets really hard. And then when you're taking your votes, you've got to do this reconciliation of, was everybody who's gonna vote, were they here for enough meetings, did anybody miss too many? It gets really hard, and you get well-meaning people who just can't make it sometimes. And the ability to call in is huge, especially to participate. There was an interim remedy, actually, that it might have had a limitation on it, but if you went back and listened to the tapes of the meeting and certified that you did so, you could get it back, so that you at least heard all the input. But I think it's far better to allow people to dial in. It makes a ton of sense. It's great, good change.
Any further comments from the floor?
No, I think that maybe this is something that, this is not necessarily a bylaw, this is something that the board could consider. I think that maybe, let me look around and see what some other communities are doing on this before we move forward, would be my suggestion.
How do we implement this? Is it?
It's a vote of the board, I
Yep,
believe.
selectmen's vote.
Yeah.
Oh, that we allow all of our, like, subordinate boards to do it? Is that, and it's for appointed boards, is that the?
It's
Actually,
for elected-
no.
It's
elected.
townwide.
It's townwide, because
yeah,
it's
yeah.
Concom too.
Right.
and-
Townwide, with the exception of the Commission on Disability Issues, which
Because they're already
already has
covered.
the authorization.
And why what do you want to wait on? Versus, I wouldn't vote tonight, but,
Yeah, I'd like to kind of see how other people have implemented this, how, if they've implemented, how's it worked. I have some reservations I'd like to flush out personally.
I want both sides of the issue.
Anybody else?
Again, thank you, Dan.
Absolutely.
So what is the opinion of the board? Do we want to do nothing at this time and just wait until we hear back from Steve and have him give us an update at one of our future meetings?
yeah.
Okay.
I think in particular, Steve, I'd be interested in knowing, I mean, if someone's participating by conference call, then they're somewhat limited. I mean, if, for example, we have a presentation tonight, if you're not here, you don't see this. It's harder to follow, I think. And so I think in certain circumstances, it may be appropriate, perhaps, you know, in certain capacities, but I think in others, you really, the quality of your participation is really compromised. And I think that's, if you could look at it with an eye towards that, I think that would be an important aspect.
So this would not affect town meeting, would it?
This has no impact on town meeting whatsoever.
Yeah, because that's just a cluster from the get-go if we allow that in this beginning genesis.
That would be a disaster.
Mr. Lever, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much, Dan, that was great.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayo, would you like to go
Yes,
into personnel?
On 4B, we have a number of committees that we would like to, that we need to fill, because they're coming up. We'd like to advertise. as we normally do, including heavy on the social media. Advisory Board of Public Works, Albion Cultural Exchange, Board of Appeals, Cable Advisory Board, Capital Planning Committee, Conservation Commission, Council on Aging, Cultural Council, Commission on Disability Issues, Fence Viewer, Permanent Building Committee, and Recreation Commission. We would like permission to go out and do those advertisements and what have you, complete with resumes of people, whether they're sitting or not, so this board can make a decision. You can take it all in one vote if you want, Mr. Chairman.
I move we ask Mr. Mayo to advertise for the positions listed.
Second.
So I'll move second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Hey,
Thank
Steve,
you.
how many spots are up on the ZBA right now?
Off the top, do you know? One.
One?
One.
Did we miss anything?
Nope, we have a few more. We have to get into licenses and permits. We have a one-day liquor license request for the Doyle School PTO for April 7th, 2018, from 6 PM until 11 PM at the AmeriCal Civic Center.
Second.
Move second, and all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. One-day liquor license for the Wakefield Track and Booster Club from May 19th, 2018, from 7 PM until 11 PM at the AmeriCal Civic Center.
So moved.
I'd like to make a
Second.
motion to waive the fee.
Sure.
But when we waive the fees, I assume this is a fundraising thing and not just a social get-together.
This is a fundraising thing for
Right.
us, yeah.
Right, and we're only waiving the fee
Yep.
for the liquor license.
Perfect.
Amended, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Next liquor license is for, a one-day liquor license for Wayne Tar for April 2nd, 2018, from 6 PM till 8 PM at the AmeriCal Civic Center.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. One-day liquor license for Brian Falvey for March 27, 2018, from 5 PM until 8 PM at the AmeriCal Civic Center. No, we're not gonna wait.
Who is it?
Who is that?
I have to pay money to give away beer and wine? All right, I'm gonna abstain, obviously, that's all.
I'll vote twice.
So moved.
So moved, seconded, thank you, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much. I believe we covered all items on the written agenda. Matters not anticipated by the chairman within 48 hours of the meeting. Let us start with the right-hand side and work our way around.
So we have the Gator Gallop coming up Saturday, the 7th of April, around the lake. I encourage everyone to sign up if you haven't already. And otherwise, happy Easter and happy Passover to everyone. Thank you.
Tony.
Really, other than that, happy Easter and happy Passover, everything is good on my end. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Falvey.
I guess a couple of things. First one, I actually had somebody on my own street come to me and say, hey, we've got to do something about the speed of vehicles that cut through our neighborhood and so forth, and it's been kind of an ongoing issue, and I said, I will get that to the Traffic Advisory Committee, so if we could get that done, that'd be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I guess what else? Yeah, I am having a meet and greet tomorrow night, so that's what the liquor license is for. But so I welcome, just like I get input from him, input from anybody else in the town. Love to hear from people. So, and then I guess the final thing, I was telling a story as we were waiting for the meeting to start tonight. In my work, I run a significant part of my company's business in Canada, and so I have people who report to me in Canada, and I was on the phone with them today, and just as in a sidebar, I said, I have this campaign, and I'm running for re-election to the Board of Selectmen. And interestingly, their first comment was, you have a board called Selectmen? Isn't that a little gender? And right off the bat, first comment. And I just thought it was really just kind of interesting when we assess these things. So, and I told them, well, you've put your finger right on a very significant issue. So, but that is the perspective that's out there. So I'm glad we're moving to make a change here. So, and I think that's it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Peter?
I'm good, just happy Easter, like everyone said, happy Passover, good meeting.
Maureen?
Two things. One, we heard about all the great things HRC has been doing. They really have been doing amazing programming. They have a presentation coming up next week, April 3rd, about some civil rights issues, 7 o'clock at the Public Safety Building in that auditorium. So if people can go, it's a great thing. And then just the other thing for us, not to decide tonight, but to continue to discuss. I'm so proud of the students and others who marched on Saturday, and who also had the walkout the week before. Melrose, last week, their Board of Aldermen passed a resolution to urge the President of the U.S., Senate, and the U.S. House of Representatives to act on gun control legislation. And I think it's something that I'd like this board to consider. There's not, we can do what we can do locally, but I think to support our students and to support all of us who think we need to do something and now is the time to do something, I'd encourage all of us to think about doing a resolution like this.
Very good.
I'd be in favor of that.
Yeah, I agree with Maureen completely on that. Also, so proud of our own Wakefield students who marched in the Boston Common on this past Saturday and participated in the walkout. Being in the state of Massachusetts, where we have great gun laws, but this is such a bigger issue, and I think if our local boards can do something at a grassroots level, that's really how these things are going to change, and support our students. I'm so proud of them, my goodness. That's all.
Thank you.
Nothing, thanks.
All set, Mr. Chairman.
I just have a couple of items. One of them is a request from the West Side Social Club for consideration from a member of this board to give opening greetings at the Memorial Day ceremonies. So I think a formal request will be coming in at the first of the month, but they were asked that we give the board a heads up ahead of time so that they are seeking someone to go there and bring greetings from the town on that day. We had a program that was going on in the town, the Wingo program. I just encourage a lot of the citizens to continue actively participating in that, because it's only going for another.
No, it's actually closed.
It's already closed.
March 15th.
March 15th. I thought you said 2 more weeks. No. Okay, so it's already gone, so that means we will be drawing winners from that relatively soon. So with that, I have no further comments. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Meeting is now closed.